A highly trained team of canine German Shepherds veered off their training path in Oak Ridge National Forest, their handlers losing sight of them in the dense summer foliage. The dogs, guided only by instinct, plunged through the undergrowth until they found him, an elderly man chained to a massive oak, his ranger uniform torn and bloodied, skin blistered from 3 days in the punishing sun. But what happened next defied explanation. The lead dog, a scarred German Shepherd, didn't just bark. He circled the tree, examining the chains, then brought water in cupped leaves. The others formed a protective perimeter while one raced back toward their handlers. As consciousness slipped away, the ranger felt the dog's warm muzzle press against his cheek. Through cracked lips, he whispered 5 words that would change everything. "Michael sent you, didn't he?" Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from now. Let's continue with the story. Robert Miller had given 43 years of his life to Oak Ridge National Forest. At 63, his weathered face mapped a lifetime spent beneath open skies, crow's feet from squinting against harsh sunlight, deep creases carved by worry during wildfire seasons, and a perpetual tan that no winter could fully fade. Despite recommendations to accept a desk position, Robert remained steadfast in his commitment to active duty. "These old boots still have miles left in them," he'd tell younger rangers who marveled at his stamina. Oak Ridge wasn't just his workplace, it was his sanctuary. After losing his wife Eleanor to cancer 8 years ago, the forest became both his office and his home. Their modest cabin sat on the eastern edge of the Ranger District, where morning light filtered through ponderosa pines and the evening air carried the scent of wild sage. Eleanor had loved that cabin, had planted the wildflowers that still bloomed each spring along the walkway. What few people knew was that Robert's dedication to Oak Ridge went beyond professional duty. His son Michael had played among these same trees as a boy, learning to identify birds by their calls and tracks by their patterns. Michael, who grew up to join the Army's elite K-9 units. Michael, who never returned from his 3rd deployment to Afghanistan. 4 years had passed since the folded flag ceremony. But for Robert, grief remained a constant companion, quieter now, but ever present. The Forest Service had changed over the decades. Budget cuts, political appointments, and increasing pressure to open protected areas for development had transformed the once unified Ranger Service. William Parker, sheriff of Oak Ridge County and Robert's friend since their Vietnam days, often reminisced about simpler times over whiskey on Robert's porch. "Remember when our biggest worry was campers leaving their fires unattended?" William would say, his badge catching the sunset as he sipped from his glass. Sarah Connor represented the new generation of Forest Service. At 35, she brought scientific expertise and technological savvy to her role as the district's K-9 handler. Her 4 German Shepherds were trained in search and rescue, wildlife tracking, and evidence detection. The lead dog, Chief, a powerful animal with a distinctive scar above his left eye, had come to the program through a military rehabilitation initiative. Like many service dogs returning from war zones, Chief struggled with adjustment. He performed his duties flawlessly but remained emotionally distant, connecting with no one. The town of Oak Ridge itself was changing too. Once a thriving logging community, it now balanced precariously between tradition and progress. Tourism had replaced timber as the economic backbone, with hikers, photographers, and wildlife enthusiasts filling the streets from spring through fall. But during harsh winters, unemployment soared, and resentment toward environmental protection sometimes bubbled to the surface at town meetings. It was at one such meeting, 3 days before being found chained to the heritage oak, that Robert Miller had stood alone against a powerful coalition of interests. No one could have predicted how quickly things would unravel, or how a damaged German Shepherd would somehow recognize a dying man he'd never met. The town hall meeting had run later than usual that Tuesday evening. Robert sat in the back row, notebook open on his lap, watching as Oak Ridge's mayor facilitated what was supposed to be a routine discussion about summer tourism preparations. When Gerald Whitman, representing Northwest Timber Holdings, took the podium for what was listed as a community business update, Robert's instincts immediately sharpened. Oak Ridge has always been a working forest community, Whitman began, his tailored suit out of place among the flannel and denim that filled most seats. While we appreciate the tourism dollars, we need to remember our roots. Northwest Timber is proposing a limited extraction plan for Sector 17, creating 35 new jobs and injecting approximately $4 million into local businesses. Robert's pencil stopped mid-note. Sector 17 contained old-growth forest, protected under federal designation for its unique ecosystem. When question time came, he raised his hand. "Mr. Whitman," Robert began, standing slowly as his bad knee protested, "Sector 17 isn't zoned for commercial timber. Those trees are 300 years old and protected under the 1992 Heritage Forest Act." Whitman's smile never faltered. "Ranger Miller, always the conservationist. We've been working with the Department of Interior on a special dispensation. Times change. Regulations adapt." After the meeting, Robert drove directly to his office at the ranger station. He pulled the sector maps and confirmed his suspicion. Someone had already marked trees in the protected zone. Bright orange spray paint defaced dozens of ancient trunks, including specimens that predated the American Revolution. The phone on his desk rang just after midnight. Robert had been so absorbed in photographing the documentation that he'd lost track of time. "You're digging where you shouldn't, Miller." The voice was disguised, low and gravelly. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows you live alone in that cabin. Someone who knows all about your nighttime walks. Drop the Sector 17 investigation." The line went dead. Robert locked the evidence in his desk and drove home, checking his rearview mirror more than usual. The next morning, he called William. "Bill, I need to talk to you about something unofficial." They arranged to meet for lunch, but William never showed. A text message claimed an emergency custody case had pulled him into court. Robert decided to inspect Sector 17 himself. He parked his ranger vehicle at a trailhead and hiked 3 miles to the boundary line. The illegal marking extended deeper than he'd initially thought. Worse, he found heavy equipment tracks. Someone had brought in machinery recently, despite the area being closed to vehicles. He was photographing a particularly egregious cut when he heard the snap of a branch behind him. Before he could turn fully, something hard struck the back of his head. His knees buckled as darkness crept into the edges of his vision. "Told you to drop it, old man." The voice matched the phone call. Robert fought to stay conscious, to see his attacker, but a second blow sent him spiraling into darkness. When he awoke, the sun had shifted. His head throbbed, and his mouth felt desert dry. Robert tried to move, but his arms wouldn't respond. Cold metal bit into his wrists. Blinking to clear his vision, the horrifying reality came into focus. He was chained to the massive trunk of the heritage oak, the oldest tree in Sector 17. "Help!" he shouted, his voice echoing through the empty forest. "Anybody!" Birds scattered at the noise, but no human response came. The chains were masterfully secured. His arms wrapped around the massive trunk, wrists locked together on the opposite side where he couldn't see or reach the mechanism. A second chain around his chest kept him upright. And his radio, phone, and even his water bottle had been taken. As the first day of captivity turned to night, Robert assessed his situation with the methodical calm that had kept him alive in Vietnam. The nearest trail was at least 2 miles away. His regular patrol route wouldn't bring another ranger here for 3 days. Without water, in the summer heat, dehydration would become critical within 48 hours. He tried working his hands, seeking any slack in the chains, but succeeded only in rubbing his wrists raw. As darkness fell, temperatures dropped. Wearing only his summer uniform, Robert shivered against the tree bark. Memories of prison camp flooded back, techniques for conserving energy, staying alive. He slowed his breathing, minimized movement, and began the mental exercises his old commander had taught. "Name 5 things you can see," he whispered to himself. 4 things you can feel. 3 things you can hear. By dawn, thirst had become his primary torment. Morning dew collected on leaves tantalizingly out of reach. He strained toward them, trying to catch droplets on his tongue, managing only a few precious drops. The second day brought hallucinations. Eleanor sat beside him for hours, stroking his hair as she had during his nightmares after Vietnam. "You need to stay awake, Bobby," she told him, using the nickname only she had ever used. "Michael is sending help." "Michael's gone, Ellie," he croaked, his voice hardly recognizable. "A father knows his son," she replied before fading away with the afternoon light. The forest's sounds became distorted. Every rustle represented potential rescue or return of his captors. Neither materialized. Night fell again, colder than the first. Robert drifted in and out of consciousness, his military training battling against physical deterioration. By the third morning, Robert could no longer feel his hands. The chains had cut deep enough to draw blood, which had dried and crusted around the metal links. His tongue was swollen, his lips cracked and bleeding. The sun beat mercilessly against his exposed skin, raising blisters on his neck and face. His thoughts turned to Michael. Not the uniformed man in the flag-draped coffin, but the little boy who had climbed this very oak tree, pretending it was a lookout tower. "I can see forever, Dad!" he had shouted from the branches. Robert had taught him to respect the ancient sentinel, explaining how it had stood watch over the forest since before Europeans arrived on the continent. "I'm sorry, son," Robert whispered to the empty air. "I tried to protect your trees." The third afternoon brought the strangest hallucination yet, barking in the distance. Robert's dried eyes struggled to focus as shapes moved through the underbrush. Dogs. Real dogs, not the product of his dying mind. When the first German shepherd broke through the tree line, Robert thought he'd finally lost grip on reality. The dog stopped, alert, ears forward. It was large, powerfully built, with a distinctive scar above its left eye. 3 more shepherds emerged behind it, moving with military precision. The lead dog approached cautiously, nostrils flaring as it caught Robert's scent. Recognition flickered in the animal's intelligent eyes. Impossible recognition that momentarily broke through Robert's delirium. "Michael?" Robert whispered, his voice a dried husk. The dog moved closer, sniffing the chains, circling the tree to inspect the binding mechanism. It returned to face Robert, their eyes meeting. Something passed between them, a connection that transcended Robert's logical understanding. The scarred shepherd moved with purpose now. It disappeared briefly, returning with leaves cupped in its mouth, water droplets glistening within the makeshift container. The dog raised its offering to Robert's parched lips. Water, blessed water, trickled into his mouth. The other dogs formed a perimeter, one standing guard while another began digging at the tree's base. The third shepherd suddenly bolted back the way they had come, moving with urgent speed. Robert watched in disbelief as the lead dog began working at the chains with its teeth, pulling and twisting at the metal with determined focus. The animal's intelligence seemed beyond training. It was problem-solving, attempting different angles of attack on the restraints. "Who trained you, boy?" Robert managed between cracked lips. The dog paused, ears perking at his voice, then returned to its work with renewed vigor. Time blurred again. The lead dog continued bringing water and leaves. The digging dog had exposed the tree's roots, perhaps seeking a way to loosen Robert's bonds. The guard dog maintained its alert watch, growling occasionally at unseen threats. Robert's consciousness flickered like a candle in wind. As darkness threatened to claim him again, he felt the lead dog's warm muzzle press against his cheek, an act of comfort, of connection. With the last of his strength, he whispered the words that rose from some deep, knowing place within him. "Michael sent you, didn't he?" The dog's eyes held his, and in that moment, just before human voices broke through the trees, Robert could have sworn the animal nodded. Sarah Connor had been tracking her K9 unit for nearly an hour through increasingly difficult terrain. The dogs had never broken formation during a training exercise before, especially Chief, whose discipline was legendary among handlers. One moment they were practicing standard search patterns, the next all four animals had frozen, ears alert, before bolting into the dense underbrush of Sector 17. "Something's wrong," she told the two junior handlers accompanying her. "Chief doesn't just run off." They followed the GPS trackers on the dogs' collars, moving as quickly as the rough landscape allowed. When Atlas, the youngest shepherd, came bounding back toward them, barking with unusual urgency, Sarah's concern deepened. "He wants us to follow," she said, checking her sidearm instinctively. Atlas led them through a winding game trail, his normally playful demeanor replaced by focused determination. The scene they discovered defied immediate comprehension. 3 German shepherds surrounded an ancient oak tree, and chained to its massive trunk was a man, barely recognizable beneath dirt, blood, and sunburn as Senior Ranger Robert Miller. "Call for medical evac," Sarah shouted to her assistants, rushing forward. Chief, the scarred shepherd who typically maintained aloof professionalism, stood directly before Robert, alternating between attempting to loosen the chains with his teeth and bringing water-soaked leaves to the man's lips. Sarah reached Robert, pressing fingers to his neck. The pulse was weak, thready. "Ranger Miller, can you hear me?" His eyelids fluttered but didn't open. His wrists were raw and infected where the chains had cut into them. "Bolt cutters in my pack," she ordered. "And the emergency medical kit." As her assistant worked to cut through the chains, Sarah noticed something extraordinary. Chief had positioned himself where Robert could see him, maintaining eye contact, as if reassuring the dying man. The dog's behavior was unprecedented. In 2 years, he had never shown emotional connection to any human, not even Sarah. "How did they find him?" her assistant whispered, struggling with the heavy chains. "I don't know," Sarah replied, administering emergency fluids through an IV line. "This area isn't on any regular patrol route." When the chains finally gave way, Robert collapsed forward into Sarah's arms. Chief immediately pressed against the ranger's side, offering physical support. The dog's usual standoffishness had vanished entirely. "Chopper's 10 minutes out," the second assistant reported, returning from establishing radio contact. "Sheriff's been notified." Robert stirred slightly as Sarah cleaned his wrist wounds. "Michael," he murmured, his voice barely audible. "Michael sent them." Sarah exchanged glances with her assistants. "Who's Michael?" "His son," the younger handler replied. "Died in Afghanistan about 4 years ago." "Military dog handler." Chief whined softly, nosing Robert's limp hand. Sarah had never seen the dog display such concern for any human. Something about this didn't make sense. It was as if Chief recognized Robert, though they'd never met during her tenure. The medical helicopter arrived with a deafening clatter, blowing leaves and debris across the small clearing. As emergency medical technicians rushed forward with the stretcher, Chief became protective, positioning himself between Robert and the approaching strangers. "Easy, Chief," Sarah commanded. "They're helping." To her surprise, the dog looked from her to Robert, then stepped aside, not retreating, but allowing access while maintaining vigilant watch. "He's severely dehydrated," the lead EMT assessed. Multiple lacerations, probable concussion, second-degree sunburn. We need to move now. As they lifted Robert onto the stretcher, his eyes opened briefly, his gaze locked on Chief, and his cracked lips formed silent words. The dog moved closer, ears forward, utterly focused on the ranger's face. "Sir, can you tell us what happened?" the EMT asked, securing Robert to the stretcher. Robert's eyes never left the German shepherd. "The dog," he whispered hoarsely. "Need the dog." "We'll bring him to the hospital once we've secured the scene," Sarah assured him, though such a visit would violate protocols. Something in Robert's desperate expression made her willing to bend rules. As they carried Robert toward the helicopter, Chief attempted to follow. Sarah caught his collar. "Not now, boy. We'll see him soon." To her astonishment, Chief pulled against her grip with uncharacteristic defiance. When the helicopter lifted off, the dog sat back on his haunches and howled, a sound Sarah had never heard him make before. Sheriff William Parker arrived 20 minutes later, his cruiser kicking up dust as it navigated the narrow forest road to the nearest access point. He approached the scene with the heavy gait of a man bearing an invisible burden. "Found him just in time," Sarah reported, leading William to the heritage oak. "Another day out here he wouldn't have made it." William surveyed the chains still hanging from the tree, his weathered face unreadable. "Any idea who did this?" "No signs of other vehicles. Whoever it was covered their tracks well." Sarah pointed to the barely visible path. "They knew the ranger patrol schedules. Had to pick such an isolated spot." William nodded slowly, taking photographs of the scene. "Robert's too smart to have come out here alone without telling anyone. Something must have brought him to this specific location." Sarah watched as Chief circled the tree, nose to the ground, tracking scents with methodical precision. "The dogs found him, broke away during a training exercise and led us straight here." "Good dogs," William muttered, though his attention seemed divided. "Especially that one with the scar? Military trained?" "Chief? Yes, he came to us through the Veteran Service Dog Program. Served 3 tours in Afghanistan with his handler." Sarah hesitated. "Sheriff, Robert said something strange before they took him. He mentioned someone named Michael sending the dogs." William's hand froze over his notepad. "Michael? You sure?" "Yes. The younger handler said that was Robert's son's name, the one who died overseas." William pocketed his notebook abruptly. Delirium from dehydration. Man was hallucinating. He turned away, examining the ground around the tree. "I want round-the-clock deputies at the hospital. Whoever did this might try to finish the job." As crime scene technicians arrived to process the area, Sarah gathered her K9 unit. 3 of the dogs responded to commands immediately, but Chief remained by the tree, sniffing persistently at a specific section of bark. "Chief, come," Sarah ordered more firmly. The shepherd looked at her, then deliberately pawed at the ground beneath the tree. Sarah approached, curious despite her frustration. Chief had uncovered something half buried in the soil, a small piece of fabric torn from a shirt or jacket. Sarah bagged it as evidence, noticing an unusual emblem partially visible on the scrap. "Good boy," she said quietly, slipping the bag into her pocket rather than handing it to the crime scene unit. Something felt wrong about this entire situation, and until she understood what, she would keep her own counsel. At Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital, Robert drifted in and out of consciousness as doctors worked to stabilize him. His broken body responded to treatment, but his mind remained caught between present danger and haunting memories. In lucid moments, he tried to communicate about Sector 17 and the illegal logging operation, but medical staff attributed his urgency to confusion. Late that evening, as shadows lengthened across his hospital room, Robert opened his eyes to find Sheriff William at his bedside. His old friend looked haggard, older than his 65 years. "You had us worried, Bob," William said, pulling a chair closer. "Doctor says you'll recover, but it'll take time." Robert studied William's face, searching for something he couldn't name. "The dogs," he managed, his voice still rough from dehydration. "The German shepherd with the scar." William's expression tightened momentarily. "Sarah Connor's K9 unit found you. Lucky break." "Not luck," Robert whispered. "He knew me, Bill. That dog knew who I was." William patted Robert's arm gently. "You were hallucinating, old friend. Happens with severe dehydration. We've got deputies posted outside your door until we catch whoever did this." Robert wanted to argue but lacked the strength. Instead, he asked, "Sector 17, did you check?" "We're handling everything," William interrupted. "You focus on getting better." He stood, adjusting his badge. "Doctor says no visitors for at least 48 hours. You need rest." After William left, Robert stared at the ceiling, fragments of memory reassembling, the timber marking, the threatening call, the attack. Something about William's demeanor felt wrong, but pain medication pulled him back towards sleep before he could process why. He dreamed of Michael, not as the grown soldier he'd become, but as the 10-year-old boy who'd rescued an abandoned shepherd puppy and named him Chief. In the dream, Michael stood beside the heritage oak, pointing urgently toward something Robert couldn't see. "Dad," Dream Michael said, "they're hiding in plain sight. Look harder." Robert awakened with a start around midnight. His room was dark except for the glow of monitoring equipment. As his eyes adjusted, he realized he wasn't alone. A large shape occupied the chair beside his bed. The scarred German shepherd sat upright, watching him with alert amber eyes. "Chief?" Robert whispered, wondering if he was hallucinating again. The dog's ears perked forward at his name. Tentatively, Robert extended his bandaged hand. Chief moved closer, sniffing carefully before gently resting his muzzle against Robert's palm. The connection felt electric, not just the comfort of an animal, but something deeper, as if the dog carried a piece of Michael with him. "How did you get in here?" Robert asked softly. Hospital regulations strictly prohibited animals outside service dogs accompanying patients. The door opened, spilling hallway light into the room. Sarah Connor slipped inside, closing it quietly behind her. "I broke about 15 regulations bringing him," she said, approaching the bed. "But he wouldn't settle at the kennel, kept howling and trying to escape. I've never seen him like this." Robert's fingers gently stroked Chief's head. "He was my son's dog, wasn't he?" Sarah nodded slowly. "I checked his service records after what you said. Chief served with Michael Miller in Afghanistan. After Michael died, Chief was retired with PTSD. Wouldn't work with other handlers. I was his last chance before they—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Euthanasia," Robert supplied. "Military dogs that can't adjust." "Yes, he's been with our unit for 18 months. Expert at tracking, obedient to commands, but emotionally disconnected. Until today." Sarah studied the pair. "He recognized you somehow." "Michael had a puppy named Chief when he was a boy," Robert explained. "Looked just like this one. Same scar over the eye from crawling under our fence. When Michael enlisted, he sent pictures of his military dog. I never made the connection it was the same name." "Dogs don't live that long," Sarah said gently. Robert nodded. "Different dog, same name." "Michael always said when he had a shepherd, he'd name it Chief." He looked down at the dog. "But this one acts like he knows me." "Animals sense things we don't understand," Sarah offered. "Maybe he recognizes Michael in you." Chief settled himself against the bed, positioning his body protectively beside Robert. The dog's presence brought comfort that medication couldn't touch. A living connection to his son, and perhaps, Robert thought, the key to understanding why someone had tried to kill him. "Sarah," Robert said, his voice stronger now, "I need to tell you what I found in Sector 17. Someone is illegally marking protected trees, and I think it goes beyond simple timber theft." She leaned closer, her expression serious. "The heritage oak is in Sector 17. They chained you to it as a message." "Yes, but there's more." Robert tried to sit up, wincing as pain shot through his battered body. "I found equipment tracks, heavy machinery, and unusual soil samples." "What kind of samples?" "I'm not sure. I sent them to the regional lab the day before I was attacked." Robert's eyes met hers. "Someone in the department is involved. The attackers knew my schedule, knew that area would be unpatrolled." Sarah's face showed conflicting emotions: concern, doubt, resolve. "That's a serious accusation." "I know. That's why I need your help." Robert glanced at the door. "And Chief's, I don't know who I can trust anymore." Chief raised his head at the mention of his name, eyes moving between Robert and Sarah as if following their conversation. The dog's unusual behavior continued to surprise Sarah, who had never seen him so engaged, so present. "Why did they let you live?" she asked suddenly. "If they wanted to silence you, why not just—" She stopped, unable to finish the thought. "Kill me outright?" Robert completed grimly. Too many questions. A ranger disappearing during patrol triggers immediate investigation. "But an old man having a heart attack alone in the woods or dying of exposure after getting lost, that happens." Sarah nodded slowly. "What do you need from me?" "Access to my office. There's evidence locked in my desk. And protection for Chief. Whoever is behind this would recognize his significance if they knew he was Michael's dog." As if understanding, Chief pressed closer to Robert's side. Sarah watched the dog's protective posture with newfound appreciation. "I'll help," she decided, "but we do this carefully. If someone inside the department is involved, they'll be watching both of us now." The night nurse appeared in the doorway, startling at the sight of the German shepherd. "Animals aren't permitted. Service dog," Sarah interrupted smoothly, showing her Forest Service badge. "Special authorization for Ranger Miller's recovery. PTSD support." The nurse hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Keep him off the bed. Doctor's doing rounds early tomorrow." After she left, Robert looked at Chief with new understanding. The dog who had found him against impossible odds, who had tried to free him and bring him water, who now guarded him like precious cargo, this wasn't just coincidence or animal instinct. "Get some rest," Sarah advised, moving toward the door. "I'll come back tomorrow with whatever I find in your office." As she slipped out, Robert settled back against his pillows, one hand resting on Chief's head. The dog's steady presence anchored him against the tide of pain and uncertainty. "Michael sent you to me, didn't he?" Robert whispered. Chief's amber eyes held his, intelligent and somehow knowing. For the first time since learning of his son's death, Robert felt Michael's presence, not as a ghost or hallucination, but as a continuation of love through this remarkable animal. Outside in the corridor, Sarah Connor pulled the evidence bag from her pocket, examining the fabric scrap Chief had uncovered. The partial emblem was becoming clearer under the bright hospital lights. Not a logging company logo as she'd initially thought, but something far more troubling. The distinctive shoulder patch of the Oak Ridge County Sheriff's Department. Morning brought new clarity to Robert Miller as the fog of medication and dehydration gradually lifted. The hospital room's sterile whiteness contrasted sharply with his last memories of forest greens and browns. Chief remained exactly where he had settled the night before, amber eyes tracking every movement of medical staff who entered the room. The doctors had reluctantly accepted the dog's presence after Sarah showed them paperwork designating Chief as a temporary service animal for Robert's recovery, documentation she had hastily created using her Forest Service credentials. "Your physical recovery is progressing better than expected," Dr. Lawrence informed Robert during morning rounds. Remarkable resilience for a man your age who spent 3 days without water. He glanced at Chief with mild disapproval, though I still have reservations about the dog. Chief stays, Robert replied simply, his voice stronger than the previous day. The doctor didn't argue further. When Sarah arrived mid-morning, she carried a canvas messenger bag and the cautious expression of someone who had discovered something troubling. She waited until the nurse finished changing Robert's bandages before speaking. "I accessed your office," she said quietly, closing the door. "The evidence you mentioned, it wasn't there." Robert attempted to sit up straighter, wincing as pain shot through his bruised ribs. "The desk drawer was locked. I have the only key." Sarah shook her head. The lock was intact, but the files were gone. Someone with access to the building took them. Chief's ears perked forward, sensing Robert's distress. The dog moved closer, resting his head near Robert's hand in a gesture that seemed deliberately comforting. "There's more," Sarah continued, reaching into her bag. She withdrew a small evidence bag containing the fabric scrap Chief had uncovered. "The dog found this buried near where you were chained." Robert examined the scrap through the plastic. His expression hardened as he recognized the partial emblem. "Sheriff's Department." "Could be a plant," Sarah suggested, though her tone lacked conviction. "Someone trying to frame the department. Or William knows more than he's saying." Robert's voice carried the weight of potential betrayal. "We've been friends for 40 years, but lately—" He fell silent, memories rearranging themselves like puzzle pieces. William's missed lunch meeting, his uncharacteristic evasiveness about logging permits, his sudden interest in retirement plans after decades of insisting he'd die with his boots on. "I've been doing some digging," Sarah said, keeping her voice low. "Northwest Timber Holdings isn't just interested in lumber. Their parent company has mining subsidiaries. They've been purchasing land around Oak Ridge County's borders for the past 3 years. Mining? Robert's brow furrowed. This area doesn't have valuable mineral deposits. Actually, it might. Sarah pulled out geological survey maps. These are from 1986, classified until recently. The survey indicated potential uranium deposits beneath Sector 17. Low concentration, not economically viable with extraction technology at that time. Understanding dawned on Robert's face. But technology has changed. Modern extraction methods could make it profitable. Exactly. And the heritage oak sits directly above the richest deposit point. Sarah traced the contour lines on the map. They couldn't get permits to mine there because of the protected status, so they're trying to sneak in through timber rights first. Chief suddenly lifted his head, ears alert toward the door seconds before a knock sounded. Sarah quickly slid the maps back into her bag as Deputy Mark Reynolds entered, his expression professionally neutral. "Ranger Miller," he nodded, then acknowledged Sarah with a brief glance. "Sheriff asked me to check on you and provide an update on the investigation." "Any leads?" Robert asked, studying the deputy's face. "We're pursuing several angles," Reynolds replied, his answer carefully non-committal. "Tire impressions from an unauthorized vehicle. Boot prints that don't match ranger-issued footwear. Sheriff has requested assistance from the state police." Robert nodded slowly. "Please thank William for his concern. When can I expect him to visit personally?" Something flickered across Reynolds' face. Discomfort, perhaps. "Sheriff Parker is coordinating with federal authorities about jurisdiction issues. He's quite busy." Chief had positioned himself between Robert's bed and Reynolds, his posture alert but not aggressive. The deputy eyed the dog with barely concealed unease. "I wasn't aware animals were permitted in patient rooms," Reynolds commented. "Special arrangement," Sarah replied smoothly. "Chief is assisting Ranger Miller's recovery." Reynolds didn't pursue the matter. "The sheriff asked me to inform you that we've assigned a deputy to guard your cabin. Your personal effects have been secured." After the deputy left, Sarah and Robert exchanged meaningful glances. "They're watching your cabin," she said quietly, "but not necessarily protecting it." "I need to get back there," Robert insisted. "There are photographs on my personal computer that weren't in my office files, documentation of the illegal markings." "You're in no condition to leave," Sarah protested, gesturing to his IV line and monitoring equipment. "Tomorrow," Robert countered. "Doctor said my vitals are stabilizing. I'll sign out against medical advice if necessary." Chief whined softly, drawing their attention. The dog had moved to the window, nose pressed against the glass as he tracked something in the parking lot below. Sarah joined him, carefully peering through the blinds. "Deputy Reynolds," she reported, watching the man speak urgently into his radio beside his cruiser. "He seems agitated." Robert's expression darkened. "They know we're connecting the dots. We need to move faster than they expect." "I'll take you to my place when you're discharged," Sarah decided. "Not your cabin. Then we'll retrieve your computer when it's safe." The remainder of the day passed with mounting tension. Nurses reported unusual numbers of Sheriff's Department personnel in and around the hospital. "Doctor." Lawrence accelerated Robert's treatment plan, removing the IV and transitioning him to oral medications by evening. "Your recovery is remarkably fast," the doctor noted with professional admiration. "Though I still recommend at least 2 more days of observation." "I appreciate your concern," Robert replied diplomatically, "but I'll be checking out tomorrow morning." After the medical staff completed their final evening rounds, Sarah returned with civilian clothes for Robert and news that increased their urgency. "I spoke with the regional lab that was testing your soil samples," she said, keeping her voice low despite the closed door. "The technician remembers receiving them, but when I asked for results, they claim no such samples had ever arrived." "They're erasing evidence," Robert concluded grimly. "That's not all." Sarah's expression was troubled. "I did background research on Northwest Timber's executives. Their head of security is former military, specialized in covert operations, a man named Victor Kellen." Robert's face paled slightly. "I know that name. He served with Michael in Afghanistan." "They weren't in the same unit, but Michael mentioned him in his letters, said Kellen had unusual methods, operated in gray areas." Chief growled softly at the name, the first aggressive sound they had heard from the normally controlled animal. "Did Chief serve with them?" Sarah asked, watching the dog's reaction with concern. "Possibly. Military K9 units often train together." Robert stroked Chief's head soothingly. "Michael never specified where Chief came from, just that they'd been paired during his second tour." "We need to assume they know Chief is with you," Sarah concluded, "and that they understand the significance." That night, Robert slept fitfully, despite pain medication. Dreams blended with memory. Michael as a boy running through the forest, the heritage oak standing sentinel over generations. William and himself as young men making promises to protect the land they both loved. Chief remained vigilant, occasionally rising to check the door or window before returning to his post beside the bed. Shortly after dawn, Sarah arrived with a wheelchair and discharge papers she had somehow expedited. Dr. Lawrence made a final attempt to convince Robert to stay longer, but ultimately signed the necessary forms. "Your body needs rest to heal properly," he cautioned. "No exertion, no stress." Robert smiled thinly. "I'll do my best, Doctor." They exited through a service entrance Sarah had scouted the previous day, avoiding the main lobby where a deputy lingered beside the information desk. Chief moved ahead of them, behavior shifting subtly into what Robert recognized as military patrol formation: alert, scanning, protective. Sarah's personal vehicle, a weathered Jeep Cherokee with Forest Service modifications, waited in the staff parking area. She helped Robert into the passenger seat while Chief jumped into the back, positioning himself to watch through all windows. "We'll take the mountain road," Sarah decided as they pulled away from the hospital. "Longer route to my cabin, but less likely to encounter sheriff's patrols." Robert watched the town of Oak Ridge recede in the side mirror, its familiar streets suddenly feeling foreign and threatening. For 43 years he had protected this community and its surrounding wilderness. Now both had turned against him. "I need to understand why William would be involved in this," he said finally, breaking the heavy silence. "We've known each other since basic training, served together, built our lives here together after Vietnam." Sarah navigated a particularly steep curve before responding. "Money can be persuasive, especially with retirement looming. The sheriff's department has faced budget cuts for 3 consecutive years." "It's more than that," Robert insisted. "William believes in law and order above all else. Always has." "People change," Sarah replied softly, "or reveal who they've always been when pressed." The mountain road narrowed as they climbed higher, pine forests closing in on both sides. Chief suddenly stood in the back seat, hair rising along his spine as he stared intently through the windshield. "What is it, boy?" Robert asked, following the dog's gaze. Around the next bend, a sheriff's department SUV blocked the road completely, lights flashing. Deputy Reynolds stood beside it, hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. "This isn't a random checkpoint," Sarah murmured, slowing the Jeep but not stopping. "Keep driving," Robert instructed quietly. "My cabin is just over that ridge. There's an old fire road that connects through if we can get past them." Sarah assessed the situation rapidly. "Hold on," she warned, then suddenly accelerated, swerving around the SUV with mere inches to spare. Reynolds shouted, reaching for his weapon, but they were already past him, tires spitting gravel as Sarah pushed the Jeep to its limits. "They'll pursue," Robert stated, bracing himself against the dashboard as pain lanced through his healing body. "I'm counting on it," Sarah replied grimly. "It confirms they're watching us, not protecting us." Chief maintained perfect balance despite the vehicle's wild movements, body tense but controlled. The dog's training was evident in every calculated shift and alert response. The Jeep fishtailed around another curve, then Sarah abruptly cut the wheel, taking them onto a nearly invisible track between tall pines. Branches scraped the vehicle's sides as they bounced along the overgrown fire road Robert had mentioned. "They won't follow us in their SUV," Robert explained as Sarah navigated the treacherous path. "Too wide, too new. This road hasn't been maintained in decades." Sure enough, when they emerged onto a ridge overlooking Robert's cabin 10 minutes later, no pursuit was visible. The property sat nestled against the mountainside, morning sunlight glinting off its windows. A sheriff's cruiser was parked in the driveway, the promised protection detail. "We can't approach directly," Sarah noted, scanning the area with practiced eyes. "That deputy will have been alerted by now." Robert pointed to a trail barely visible among the trees. "There's a maintenance access for the water tank behind the cabin. We can approach from above without being seen." They parked the Jeep hidden among dense pines and continued on foot, Chief leading the way along the narrow path. Robert moved slowly, each step sending fresh pain through his still healing body. Sarah supported him when necessary, her own training evident in how silently she navigated the rough terrain. The water tank access brought them to within 50 yards of the cabin's rear entrance. Through the trees, they could see a deputy making a perimeter check, hand on his holstered weapon as he scanned the surrounding forest. "We wait until he moves to the front," Sarah whispered. "Then we'll have about 3 minutes before he circles back." Chief remained utterly still beside them, his training allowing him to blend perfectly with the forest shadows. When the deputy disappeared around the cabin's corner, Sarah signaled, and they moved swiftly across the open space to the rear door. Robert's hands shook slightly as he retrieved a key from above the doorframe and unlocked the entrance. The familiar scent of his home, pine, coffee, old books, washed over him as they slipped inside. But something felt wrong immediately. "Someone's been searching," he whispered, noting subtle disturbances in his meticulously organized living space. Books slightly out of alignment on shelves, chair angles changed, the faintest scuff marks on wooden floors. They moved silently through the kitchen toward Robert's small home office. Chief suddenly froze, nose raised, scenting something that made his hackles rise. The dog's behavior shifted, body lowering into a protective stance in front of Robert. The office door stood partially open. Robert was certain he had left it closed before his ill-fated patrol. He exchanged glances with Sarah, who drew her sidearm and nodded once. Taking a deep breath, Robert pushed the door fully open. Sheriff William Parker sat behind the desk, Robert's laptop open in front of him. His expression showed neither surprise nor guilt, only a profound weariness that aged him beyond his years. "Figured you'd come here eventually," William said quietly, closing the laptop. "Though I expected you'd use the front door." Chief growled low in his throat, a sound of warning rather than immediate threat. William eyed the dog with respect rather than fear. "Military K9, he observed. "Michael's dog, isn't he? I recognized the training patterns when I reviewed the rescue footage." "What are you doing in my house, Bill?" Robert asked, the weight of potential betrayal heavy in his voice. William gestured to the chair across from the desk. "Sit down before you fall down, Bob. You look like hell." "I was chained to a tree for 3 days," Robert replied coldly, "thanks to someone who knew my patrol schedule and how to access restricted areas." Sarah maintained her position by the door, weapon lowered but ready. Her eyes constantly scanned for threats beyond the immediate confrontation. William sighed deeply. "It's complicated, Robert." "Uranium deposits under Sector 17, Robert stated flatly. "Northwest timber as a front for mining interests, falsified permits, erased evidence. Seems pretty straightforward to me." A flicker of surprise crossed William's face before he masked it. "You always were too smart for your own good." "Was it worth it?" Robert asked, the question laden with 40 years of friendship. "Was the money good enough to betray everything we stood for?" William's expression hardened. "You think this is about money? That I'd sell out for a paycheck?" "What else explains—" "They have my granddaughter," William interrupted, his voice cracking slightly. The revelation hung in the air, stunning both Robert and Sarah into momentary silence. "Jenny," Robert finally managed, "William's only granddaughter, a college sophomore studying environmental science." "What do you mean they have her?" "Officially, she's on a research expedition in Costa Rica," William explained, his composure slipping. "In reality, she's being held by Kellen's people, has been for 6 weeks. They contacted me with proof of life and instructions. Ensure Northwest Timber gets their permits, or Jenny disappears permanently." Sarah lowered her weapon completely. "Why didn't you report this? FBI has jurisdiction in kidnapping cases." "Because they promised to kill her at the first sign of outside investigation," William replied. "They have someone inside the FBI office in Portland. They proved it by reciting details of active cases no outsider could know." Robert sank slowly into the chair opposite William, the full implications washing over him. "So when I started investigating Sector 17, you became a complication they needed removed," William confirmed grimly. "I tried to warn you off, suggested that lunch meeting to tell you to back down, but you went straight to the site instead." "You knew they would try to kill me," Robert stated, not a question, but a realization. William's eyes reflected genuine anguish. "I knew they would silence you. I didn't know how." He ran a hand over his face. "When you were reported missing, I prayed you'd just left town, gone fishing somewhere remote. Then they sent me coordinates to find your body, said exposure would finish what they started. But the dogs found him first. Sarah interjected, pieces falling into place. Yes. William looked at Chief with newfound respect. When I heard a K-9 unit had rescued you, I knew we had a chance. These people aren't infallible. They make mistakes. Like leaving department fabric at the scene, Robert noted, studying his old friend's face for signs of deception. That wasn't their mistake, William replied. That was mine. I've been to that tree 5 times since they took Jenny, trying to figure out what makes that particular area so valuable. Must have torn my sleeve during one visit. Chief had relaxed his defensive posture somewhat, though he remained vigilant beside Robert. The dog's behavior suggested he was assessing William's truthfulness through subtle cues humans might miss. "Why are you here now?" Sarah asked, gesturing toward the laptop. "What were you looking for?" "Evidence we can use without endangering Jenny." William tapped the closed computer. "Robert's meticulous. I knew he'd have documentation they might have missed." Robert's mind worked through implications rapidly. "The geological surveys. You didn't know about the uranium." William shook his head. "Not until you mentioned it just now. I knew it had to be something more valuable than timber, but couldn't piece it together." "If what you're saying is true," Sarah said carefully, "we need to proceed with extreme caution. These people have proven they're willing to kill." "It's true," William insisted, meeting Robert's gaze directly. "I'd never betray you, Bob. Not willingly. Not after everything we've been through." Robert studied his oldest friend's face, searching for the truth. Chief moved forward suddenly, approaching William without aggression. The dog sniffed the sheriff's extended hand, then, to everyone's surprise, pressed his head against it in a gesture of acceptance. "Chief seems to believe you," Robert noted quietly. "Dogs are better judges of character than people," William replied, gently patting the shepherd's head. "Always have been." Robert made his decision. "We need to see what they're really doing in Sector 17. Not just the marked trees, but whatever they're setting up under the guise of logging preparation." "Too dangerous," William objected. "They have patrols, security systems, and they're holding your granddaughter," Robert interrupted. "We need leverage to get her back safely." Sarah nodded her agreement. "Documented evidence of criminal activity would give us options, especially if we can identify who's really in charge." "Victor Kellen is just security," William confirmed. "He takes orders from someone higher up the corporate chain, someone willing to kidnap and murder for this operation." Robert glanced at his watch. "The deputy outside will be checking the rear of the house again soon. We need to move." William hesitated, then reached into his jacket and withdrew a small flash drive. "Everything I've gathered so far, communications, shell company structures, patrol schedules, it's not enough yet, but it's a start." As Robert accepted the drive, the weight of their situation settled fully upon his shoulders. His body still ached from days of torture, yet ahead lay greater challenges and dangers. Chief pressed against his leg, a silent reminder of the inexplicable connection that had saved his life once already. "Jenny was following in your footsteps," Robert said quietly to William. "Protecting the natural world, just like her grandfather taught her." William's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "She's all I have left, Bob. My daughter's gone. Wife's gone. Jenny's my whole world." "Then let's get her back," Robert replied, his voice finding new strength, "and make these people pay for what they've done to our forest and our family." Outside, the deputy's radio crackled with an alert. Chief's ears pricked forward, catching the sound before the humans could discern words. The dog moved to the window, posture signaling new danger approaching. "We've got company," Sarah warned, peering carefully through the blinds. "Multiple vehicles coming up the access road." William checked his weapon. "They must have tracked you here. We need to move now." Robert's gaze fell on a photograph on his desk, Michael in uniform, a younger chief sitting proudly beside him. The dog in the present seemed to follow his gaze, their shared connection to Michael bridging past and present. "The old mine shaft," Robert decided suddenly. "Northern edge of my property. It connects to tunnel systems that run beneath half the mountain. Michael and I explored them when he was young." "Can you make it that far?" Sarah asked, concern evident as she noted Robert's still weakened state. Robert straightened, drawing on reserves of strength he hadn't known remained. "With Chief leading the way, I'd follow that dog through hell itself." As vehicles with tinted windows began arriving outside, 4 humans and 1 extraordinary dog slipped through a hidden door in Robert's pantry, descending into darkness and toward an uncertain confrontation with forces that had underestimated the bonds of loyalty, both human and canine. The old mining tunnels beneath Robert's property predated modern mapping. Narrow passages twisted through the mountain's interior like arteries, occasionally opening into larger chambers where miners had once extracted copper and small amounts of silver. Robert led their small group through the darkness, their way illuminated only by flashlights from Sarah's pack and William's phone. Chief moved ahead confidently, his night vision and acute senses making him the perfect scout in the oppressive blackness. "These tunnels were abandoned in the 1950s, Robert explained, his voice echoing slightly against the rock walls. "The mining company declared them tapped out, but local rumor suggested they shut down because of mysterious radiation readings." "Uranium," William breathed, understanding dawning. "They found traces 70 years ago, but lacked the technology to extract it safely." "Exactly," Robert confirmed. "Northwest Timber's parent company must have accessed the original surveys. They're not after trees. They want what's underneath." Sarah consulted the rough map Robert had sketched before they entered the tunnel system. "If these connect to Sector 17 like you believe, we should be able to access the area directly beneath the heritage oak within 2 miles." The journey through the tunnels tested Robert's still recovering body. Twice he needed to stop, leaning heavily against the rocky wall as pain radiated through his chest and limbs. Chief remained attentively at his side during these pauses, amber eyes reflecting concern in the flashlight's beam. "I'm all right, boy," Robert assured the dog, drawing strength from Chief's unwavering presence. The bond between them had deepened with each passing hour, transcending normal human-animal connections. Robert felt Michael's presence in that bond, not as supernatural intervention, but as the living legacy of his son's training and love embodied in this extraordinary animal. William watched their interaction with a mixture of wonder and sadness. "Michael always had a way with animals," he observed quietly. "Remember how he rehabilitated that injured hawk when he was 12? Doctor said it would never fly again, but Michael refused to accept that." Robert nodded, the memory bringing both pain and comfort. Hawk ended up soaring higher than ever. Michael said it just needed someone to believe in it. He gently stroked Chief's head. "Like this one here." As they progressed deeper into the mountain, the tunnel characteristics began to change. Ancient timber supports gave way to modern steel reinforcements. The rough-hewn floor became surprisingly level and clear of debris. "Someone's been maintaining these passages," Sarah noted, crouching to examine fresh boot prints in the dirt. A chief suddenly stopped, ears forward, body tense. The dog's behavior shifted into alert mode, the same posture he had displayed at the hospital when sensing approaching danger. "What is it, boy?" Robert whispered, dimming his flashlight. The answer came moments later, as the faint sound of machinery reached their ears, a steady mechanical hum punctuated by occasional metallic clangs. Chief looked at Robert, waiting for instruction rather than charging ahead. "Good boy," Robert praised softly. "Stay close." They advanced more cautiously now, flashlights extinguished, guided only by the ambient glow from whatever operation lay ahead and Chief's careful navigation. The tunnel gradually widened, curving toward an area where artificial light spilled into the passageway. William gestured for them to stop several yards short of the illuminated area. "Let me scout ahead," he whispered. "I'm the only one with a badge if we're discovered." "No," Robert countered. "We go together or not at all." Sarah produced a small digital camera from her pack. "We need evidence, not confrontation. Get photos of whatever they're doing, then retreat to formulate a plan." They crept forward as a unit, Chief leading, Robert and Sarah following, with William covering their rear. The tunnel opened into a vast underground chamber that had been transformed into a sophisticated mining operation, portable lighting systems, illuminated drilling equipment, computer stations, and what appeared to be specialized extraction machinery. Workers in protective gear moved with purpose around the site, their attention focused on a central shaft that descended further into the earth. Above this shaft, sophisticated monitoring equipment displayed readings and measurements on digital screens. "That's directly beneath the heritage oak," Robert whispered, recognizing the coordinates displayed on one of the monitors. "They're drilling core samples." Sarah carefully photographed each aspect of the operation, ensuring her camera remained silent. Chief stayed pressed against Robert's leg, remarkably still despite the activity before them. "This is way beyond illegal logging," William murmured. "Those are radiation detectors. They're preparing for uranium extraction in a protected wilderness area. And without any of the required environmental impact studies or safety protocols," Sarah added, her expression grim. "A leak or spill here would contaminate the water table for the entire county." Robert's eyes narrowed as he spotted a familiar figure emerging from a temporary office structure on the far side of the cavern. "Victor Kellen," he identified, the tall, military-bearing man directing operations from a central platform. William tensed beside him. "If Kellen's here, this is their main operation." "The logging activity above ground is just cover." They observed for several more minutes, documenting personnel, equipment, and the apparent scale of the operation. Sarah's camera captured images of maps on the wall of the temporary office, plans that showed expansion well beyond Sector 17 into the heart of the protected forest. "We've seen enough," Robert finally whispered. "Let's get this evidence to the proper authorities." As they began to retreat, Chief suddenly froze, his attention locked on a secondary tunnel entrance across the cavern. The dog's posture communicated intense focus rather than threat, recognition, not warning. Robert followed Chief's gaze, at first seeing nothing unusual among the workers and equipment. Then a group of security personnel emerged from the side passage, escorting a young woman whose hands were bound before her. Even at a distance, William's sharp intake of breath confirmed her identity. "Jenny," he whispered, instinctively moving forward before Robert grabbed his arm. "Wait," Robert cautioned. "We can't help her if we're captured too." They watched as Kellen approached the young woman, speaking to her with false cordiality that didn't mask the underlying threat in his posture. Jenny's expression remained defiant, despite her obvious fatigue and the strain of captivity. "They're keeping her here, not off-site," Sarah observed. "That changes everything." Robert turned to William, whose face reflected agonizing restraint as he watched his granddaughter. "We need a different plan, one that gets Jenny out safely first, then exposes this operation." The decision to retreat was painful, but necessary. They backed away silently, returning to the darkness of the tunnel. Only when they had put considerable distance between themselves and the mining operation did they pause to regroup. "I could call in every deputy I have," William said, his voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Storm that place, get Jenny out." "And if Kellen has someone inside your department?" Sarah countered gently. "He'd know you were coming. Jenny would be the first casualty." Robert leaned against the tunnel wall, mind racing through possibilities. His years as a ranger had taught him to assess situations methodically, to find paths where others saw only obstacles. Chief sat before him, attentive and expectant, as if waiting for the solution Robert hadn't yet vocalized. "We need to separate Jenny from the main operation," Robert said finally. "Create a situation where they move her, then intercept during transport." "How do we do that?" William asked. Robert's gaze settled on Chief, an idea forming. "We give them something more immediate to worry about. A distraction significant enough to disrupt operations temporarily." "You're talking about sabotage," Sarah stated, not in accusation but in clarification. "I'm talking about triggering the safety protocols they must have in place," Robert corrected. "These people are operating illegally, but they're professionals. They'll have evacuation procedures for environmental hazards." William caught on immediately. "If they detect a potential radiation leak or structural instability, they'll evacuate non-essential personnel, including prisoners," Robert finished. "Move them to a secondary location while they assess the threat." Sarah considered the plan. The northeastern tunnel entrance is closest to the surface. It vents through an old air shaft. If we created the appearance of instability there, we could track the evacuation route and intercept Jenny during transport, William agreed, hope entering his voice for the first time. Chief had been watching Robert throughout this exchange, head slightly tilted as if following the conversation. The dog's intelligence continued to impress Sarah, who had worked with K9 units for years without witnessing such apparent comprehension. "There's another factor we need to consider," Robert said soberly. "Kellen knew Michael. If he recognizes Chief, he'll understand the dog's significance and our connection. All the more reason to move quickly," William urged. "Once we have Jenny safe, we take the evidence straight to the federal authorities." Their planning continued as they made their way back through the tunnel system, emerging in a different section of Robert's property, far from the cabin where Kellen's men were likely still searching. The afternoon sun momentarily blinded them after hours underground, but Chief adjusted instantly, scanning their surroundings for potential threats. Sarah's Jeep remained undiscovered where they had hidden it among the dense pines. They piled in quickly, Chief taking position in the back where he could monitor all approaches. "My department's emergency response cabin," William suggested as Sarah started the engine. "It's stocked with communications equipment, supplies, and it's off the regular patrol routes. We can regroup there." The drive through back forest roads was tense but uneventful. The emergency response cabin proved to be a small but well-equipped structure nestled against a rocky outcropping, partially concealed by natural camouflage. Inside, William immediately accessed the secure communication system, checking for departmental alerts. "They've reported us missing," he confirmed grimly. "All points bulletin claiming we're armed and dangerous, potentially experiencing trauma-induced paranoia. They're trying to ensure any law enforcement we encounter will treat us as threats, not victims," Sarah observed, unpacking her camera to review the evidence they'd gathered. Robert eased himself onto a bench, body finally protesting the exertion of the past hours. Chief immediately positioned himself at Robert's feet, alert but relaxed. The dog's presence provided comfort that transcended the physical, a connection to Michael, to purpose, to the certainty that they were fighting for something greater than themselves. "We need to move tonight," Robert decided, studying the maps William had spread across the cabin's central table. "Under cover of darkness, when shift changes might create momentary gaps in their security." William nodded in agreement. "I know most of my deputies' routines. If Kellen has compromised some of them, he's likely using Harris and Jenkins. They've always been susceptible to financial incentives." "What about federal authorities?" Sarah asked, connecting her camera to a laptop. "These photos clearly document criminal activity on a massive scale." "We can't risk official channels until Jenny is safe," William insisted. "But once she is—" His expression hardened with the promise of justice delayed but not abandoned. As daylight faded into dusk, they finalized their plan. Sarah would create the diversion at the northeastern tunnel entrance, a controlled destabilization that would trigger evacuation protocols without causing actual structural damage. William would position himself along the most likely evacuation route, ready to intercept the vehicle transporting Jenny. Robert, despite his still healing injuries, would provide backup with Chief, whose tracking abilities would prove essential if unexpected route changes occurred. "One more thing," Robert said as they prepared to depart. He removed his ranger badge, turning it over in weathered hands that had protected the forest for over 4 decades. "Whatever happens tonight, I want you both to know that this, what we're doing, represents the true meaning of this badge. Not just enforcing rules, but protecting what matters most." William clasped his friend's shoulder, words unnecessary between men who had shared so much history. Sarah nodded her understanding, her own commitment to the Forest Service's deeper purpose evident in her determined expression. As darkness enveloped the mountains, they moved into position. Chief led Robert through familiar terrain now transformed by shadows and heightened stakes. The dog moved with perfect confidence, occasionally pausing to ensure Robert kept pace despite his injuries. They reached the overlook position as Sarah disappeared into the northeastern tunnel entrance, carrying the materials needed for their controlled disruption. William had already departed for the intercept point along the main access road, armed with both his service weapon and the moral certainty that protecting his granddaughter superseded all other obligations. Robert settled into a concealed position with clear sight lines to the main entrance of the mining operation. Chief lay beside him, utterly still, yet vibrating with readiness. The night stretched around them, stars emerging in a clear sky that seemed oblivious to the human drama unfolding beneath it. "Your dad would be proud of you, Chief," Robert whispered, one hand resting lightly on the dog's powerful shoulder. "He always said a true guardian doesn't seek the fight, but never shies from standing between innocence and harm." Chief's amber eyes reflected starlight as he turned briefly toward Robert before resuming his vigilant watch. In that momentary connection, Robert felt the weight of all they had lost and all they still stood to lose if they failed. The peaceful mountain night shattered precisely 43 minutes later. Emergency alarms blared from within the mining operation, their urgent wailing carrying through the night air. Floodlights activated around the perimeter as personnel began emerging from the main entrance in controlled but hurried evacuation. "Sarah did it," Robert murmured, raising binoculars to better observe the operation. Through the lenses he watched as Kellen emerged, issuing rapid orders to security teams. Workers were being directed to evacuation vehicles, four-wheel drive SUVs and trucks capable of navigating the rough terrain. Robert scanned each group carefully, searching for Jenny among the evacuees. Chief suddenly tensed beside him, a low whine escaping the dog's throat. Robert followed his gaze to a separate entrance, a smaller, less obvious opening in the hillside, approximately 50 yards from the main doors. A single black SUV had pulled up, and two armed guards emerged escorting a hooded figure whose bound hands identified her immediately as a prisoner. "Jenny," Robert confirmed, reaching for the radio to alert William to the unexpected development. "They're using a secondary exit point." William's voice crackled back immediately. "I see them. They're heading north instead of east. Different route than we anticipated. Can you intercept?" "Not alone," William replied tersely. "3 armed guards plus driver, professional posture." Robert made a split-second decision. "Stay on them. We'll converge from the ridgeline. Chief can track them even if they change course." As if understanding his role, Chief was already on his feet, muscles tense with anticipation. Robert ignored the pain flaring through his healing body as he rose, focusing instead on the mission before them. They had one chance to save Jenny. And with her, the evidence needed to protect the forest that had defined Robert's life. Moving through forest at night demanded skills Robert had honed over decades. Even injured, He navigated fallen logs and dense underbrush with the sure-footedness of someone who knew the land intimately. Chief moved slightly ahead, occasionally pausing to ensure Robert followed, their coordination seamless despite the minimal visibility. The ridgeline offered both advantage and challenge, higher ground for observation, but more exposed to potential detection. Robert crouched low as they approached the point where the forest road curved around the mountain's shoulder. Below, headlights cut through darkness as the SUV carrying Jenny navigated the treacherous path. William's unmarked vehicle maintained a discreet distance behind, lights extinguished, visible to Robert only because he knew exactly where to look. The timing would need to be perfect, an interception at the switchback where the road briefly widened before continuing its descent toward the valley. "Chief," Robert whispered, the dog's attention immediately focusing on him. "Find William." It was a command they had never practiced, yet Chief seemed to understand perfectly. The shepherd disappeared into the darkness with purposeful silence, moving parallel to the road below, invisible to those who didn't know to watch for him. Robert continued along the ridgeline until he reached the position they had designated during planning. From here, he could provide oversight and, if necessary, covering fire with the hunting rifle William had supplied from the emergency cabin's provisions. Through his scope, Robert watched the SUV approach the switchback. William's vehicle had dropped further back, creating the illusion of safety for Jenny's captors. The trap was nearly set. Then everything changed in an instant. A second vehicle appeared from the opposite direction, blocking the road at the switchback. Headlights illuminated the area as armed figures emerged, weapons raised. Robert's heart sank as he recognized Deputy Mark Reynolds among them, William's right-hand man now revealed as Kellen's inside source. "Ambush," Robert breathed, reaching for his radio. "William, stand down. They're waiting for you." No response came through the static. Robert watched in growing horror as William's vehicle continued its approach toward the blocked switchback. Either his radio had failed or William was proceeding regardless of the danger. The SUV carrying Jenny had stopped, its occupants clearly confused by the roadblock until Reynolds approached the driver's window. A brief conversation ensued. Then understanding seemed to dawn as the guards relaxed slightly. It was a perfect trap. Reynolds had positioned himself to intercept not the kidnappers, but their would-be rescuers. William was driving directly into waiting weapons. Robert raised his rifle, calculating angles and distances, knowing he was too far for accurate fire against multiple targets. The situation had deteriorated beyond their planning, beyond their capabilities. Jenny remained bound in the SUV. William approached unwitting danger, and Sarah was nowhere in sight, possibly captured during her diversion attempt. In that moment of desperation, a flash of movement caught Robert's eye, a shadow detaching from shadows, moving with deliberate stealth along the edge of the illuminated area. Chief had reached the switchback unseen, positioning himself in the darkness beyond the vehicles. What happened next unfolded with such precision that Robert could only watch in awe. Chief launched from concealment directly at Reynolds, a silent black missile striking with military training and natural power. The deputy went down hard, his weapon skittering across asphalt as 70 pounds of German Shepherd pinned him to the ground. The sudden attack created instant chaos. Guards swung their weapons toward the dog, momentarily forgetting the approaching vehicle. William seized the opportunity, accelerating hard into the roadblock, forcing the second vehicle sideways and creating an opening. Robert didn't hesitate. Taking careful aim, he fired twice, not at people, but at the tires of the blocking vehicle, eliminating any chance of pursuit. The sharp reports echoed across the mountainside as rubber exploded and metal rims sparked against asphalt. Below, William had stopped beside the SUV containing Jenny. Chief had released Reynolds to confront the remaining guards, keeping them at bay with professional aggression that required no actual contact, the mere threat of his advance sufficient to create crucial hesitation. Robert began making his way down the slope as rapidly as his injured body allowed, rifle ready. By the time he reached the road, William had already extracted Jenny from the SUV and secured her in his vehicle. Chief had the remaining guards backed against their vehicle, none willing to test whether the dog's training included lethal force. "Robert," William called out, relief evident in his voice. "We've got her." Jenny looked pale but unharmed, her bound hands now free, her expression a mixture of shock and desperate hope. She recognized Robert immediately. "Uncle Bob, what's happening?" "Explanations later," Robert replied, never taking his eyes off the subdued guards. "We need to move now." Chief maintained his position, growling softly when one guard shifted slightly toward a dropped weapon. The dog's discipline was extraordinary, containing threats without escalation, controlling the situation with minimal force. "Chief, with me," Robert commanded, as he backed toward William's vehicle. The dog immediately responded, retreating in perfect synchronization while maintaining his protective stance. Reynolds was regaining consciousness, blood trickling from where his head had struck pavement during Chief's initial attack. His eyes found Robert's, hatred replacing the professional mask he had worn for years. "You're dead, old man," he spat. "All of you. Kellen doesn't leave witnesses." "Neither do I," William replied coldly, his sheriff's badge catching moonlight as he stood protectively beside his granddaughter. "The difference is, I leave evidence and due process instead of bodies." They piled into William's vehicle, Jenny in the back seat with Chief positioned protectively beside her, Robert riding shotgun despite his desire to check the young woman for injuries. William executed a perfect three-point turn and accelerated away from the disabled roadblock, taking a Forest Service road that branched from the main route a quarter-mile beyond the switchback. "Sarah?" Robert asked urgently, as they put distance between themselves and Reynolds' men. "Already clear," William confirmed. "She radioed after setting the charges, met resistance but escaped through a maintenance shaft. She's heading for the rendezvous point with the evidence." Jenny was staring at Chief with fascination despite her obvious exhaustion. Is this Michael's dog?" she asked suddenly, recognition dawning as she noticed the distinctive scar above the shepherd's eye. Robert turned in his seat, surprise evident. "You knew, Chief?" "Michael showed me pictures," Jenny explained, tentatively extending her hand toward the dog. Chief immediately softened his demeanor, gently nosing her palm in greeting. He said Chief was the best partner he'd ever had, that they looked out for each other. The simple statement carried profound weight in the darkness of the speeding vehicle. Chief had continued Michael's legacy of protection, extending it beyond the battlefield to the forest and people his handler had loved. As they navigated the complex network of forest roads toward their rendezvous point, Robert felt a strange sense of completion forming amid the danger and uncertainty. Chief's presence beside Jenny seemed to bridge past and present, connecting all their separate losses into something meaningful and whole. They were mining uranium, Jenny informed them, her voice stronger now. "I discovered their soil testing equipment while doing my own environmental studies. When I started asking questions, Kellen appeared." She shuddered slightly at the memory. "They kept me at the site because I have geology training, forced me to help interpret core samples." "Did they hurt you?" William asked, the question laden with a grandfather's fear and a sheriff's controlled fury. "Not physically," Jenny answered carefully. "Kellen said I was more valuable cooperative than broken. But they made sure I understood what would happen if I refused to help." Chief pressed closer to her side as if sensing her distress. The dog's protective instinct extended naturally to this new charge, this family member of his handler's family. "We have evidence now," Robert assured her, "enough to bring in federal authorities. This ends tonight." As they rounded the final curve approaching their rendezvous point, an abandoned fire watchtower that offered both visibility and defensibility, headlights illuminated Sarah's Jeep already in position. Relief washed over Robert at the confirmation of her safety. The night had turned in their favor against all odds. They had rescued Jenny, gathered crucial evidence, and would soon have the full force of legitimate law enforcement descending upon Kellen's operation. Yet Robert couldn't shake a growing sense of unease as they approached the watchtower. Something felt wrong. A subtle disturbance in the familiar patterns of the forest night. Chief sensed it too. The dog's relaxed posture beside Jenny suddenly transformed, body tensing, ears forward. A low, warning growl rumbled in his throat as William brought the vehicle to a stop beside Sarah's Jeep. The watchtower stood silhouetted against the night sky, its weathered structure a familiar landmark to Robert after decades patrolling these mountains. But tonight, something about its silhouette seemed wrong, altered in ways his experienced eyes couldn't immediately identify. "Wait," Robert cautioned, as William reached for his door handle. "Something's not right." In the silence that followed, they all heard it, the faint but unmistakable sound of a helicopter approaching from the north. No running lights visible, its black shape barely discernible against the night sky as it circled the watchtower once, then descended toward the small clearing beyond. "Kellen," Jenny whispered, fear returning to her voice. "That's his transport. I've heard it before." Chief's growl deepened, confirming the threat assessment. Robert exchanged glances with William, both men reaching the same conclusion simultaneously. Their safe haven had been compromised. Their rendezvous point was now the center of an expanding trap. "Sarah," William said quietly, eyes scanning the darkened landscape. "Where is she?" As if in answer, the watchtower's spotlight suddenly blazed to life, illuminating their vehicles in harsh white light that destroyed their night vision and exposed their position completely. Through squinted eyes, Robert could make out figures moving on the tower's observation platform, one of whom held Sarah at gunpoint. Their momentary advantage had evaporated. Kellen had anticipated their moves, positioned his forces accordingly, and now held both Sarah and the tactical high ground. The helicopter's arrival had merely been the closing of the trap. Chief moved restlessly between Jenny and the windshield, torn between protecting his charge and addressing the new threat. His training demanded action, yet his protective instinct recognized the danger of leaving Jenny exposed. "Options?" William asked tersely, his hand on his service weapon, though they all recognized the futility of direct confrontation. Robert's mind raced through possibilities, each more desperate than the last. They couldn't abandon Sarah, couldn't surrender Jenny back to captivity, couldn't outrun a helicopter or outgun Kellen's professional security force. In that moment of apparent hopelessness, Robert's gaze fell on Chief. The dog was watching him intently, awaiting guidance, trusting that his new handler would find a path forward just as Michael always had. That unwavering faith sparked something in Robert, a recognition that sometimes the path forward requires accepting what you cannot change to focus on what you can. "We can't win this confrontation," Robert acknowledged quietly, "but we don't need to. We just need to get the evidence out." Understanding dawned in William's eyes. "A diversion." Robert nodded, already reaching for Sarah's camera bag still containing the documented evidence of Kellen's operation. "They expect us to either surrender or attempt escape. They're not expecting a third option." "What's the play?" William asked, his tactical mind already shifting to implementation. Robert turned to Jenny. "How well do you know these mountains?" "Like the back of my hand," she replied without hesitation. "Grandpa and I have hiked every trail since I was 6. Robert nodded, decision crystallizing. "You take the evidence," he told her, handing over the camera and flash drive. "Chief goes with you." There's a seasonal creek bed half a mile east that leads to the ranger outpost on Carson Ridge. From there you can reach the highway. I'm not leaving you, Jenny protested. You're not, Robert assured her. You're completing the mission. William and I will create a diversion to cover your escape. We'll get Sarah out. William looked at Chief, then at his granddaughter, internal conflict evident in his expression. The dog will protect her? With his life, Robert confirmed. That's what Michael trained him to do. Jenny's eyes filled with tears of understanding. Uncle Bob, they'll kill you both. Not if we're more valuable alive, Robert countered. Kellen needs to know where the evidence went. He can't eliminate us until he secures it. The spotlight from the watchtower swept across their position again, accompanied by a voice amplified through a megaphone. Sheriff Parker, we have your ranger. Exit your vehicle with hands visible. Last warning before we take more permanent measures. Chief looked from Robert to Jenny, understanding crystallizing in those intelligent amber eyes. When Robert gave the command, Chief, protect Jenny, the dog immediately pressed against the young woman's side, ready to fulfill his purpose. 30 seconds, Robert told her quietly. When you hear the distraction, run east and don't look back. Stay off trails. Stick to watercourses where scent is harder to track. Chief will guide you. Jenny nodded, tears streaming now but determination replacing fear. I'll get the evidence out, I promise. Robert touched Chief's head one final time. Good boy, he whispered. Michael would be proud. The dog held his gaze momentarily, a connection transcending words, acknowledging all that remained unspoken between them. Then Chief turned his full attention to Jenny, mission parameters clear. Protect, guide, ensure mission success. Robert and William exchanged one final glance, men who had faced death together before, from the jungles of Vietnam to the wilderness of Oak Ridge. No words were necessary between them. They would create the diversion, protect those they loved, and face whatever consequences came. Ready? Robert asked simply. William nodded. Just like Cu Chi in '68. Except we're the good guys this time too, Robert replied with grim humor. Together they opened their doors and stepped into the harsh spotlight, hands raised, drawing all attention toward themselves and away from the vehicle's rear door, where Jenny and Chief waited for their moment to vanish into the protective darkness of the forest night. The helicopter's rotors created a deafening whirlwind, blowing dust and pine needles in swirling eddies as Robert and William stood exposed in the harsh spotlight. From the watchtower platform, Victor Kellen emerged beside the restrained figure of Sarah Connor. Even at this distance, Robert could see the bruising on her face and the defiant set of her jaw despite her circumstances. Sheriff Parker, Kellen called down, his voice carrying easily over the helicopter's noise. And Ranger Miller. How touching. A reunion of Vietnam veterans. Though I must say, you've lost a step since your soldiering days. William took a half step forward, hands still raised but posture conveying authority despite his vulnerable position. Let Ranger Connor go, Kellen. This is between us. Oh, I'm afraid Ms. Connor has made herself very much part of this situation, Kellen replied, gesturing casually with his sidearm. Attempting to sabotage a multi-million-dollar operation tends to draw one into the conversation. Robert scanned the perimeter without moving his head, counting at least 6 armed men strategically positioned around the clearing. Professional stances, military-grade weapons, not local muscle, but trained operatives. Behind him, through the still-open car door, he could sense Jenny and Chief waiting for their moment. "Where's the girl?" Kellen demanded, gesturing toward the vehicle with his weapon. "Jenny Parker should join our little gathering." "Safe," William answered tersely. "Beyond your reach." Kellen's laugh held no humor. "Nothing is beyond my reach in these mountains tonight, Sheriff. Your jurisdiction has been, shall we say, temporarily suspended." From the corner of his eye, Robert caught movement in the tree line opposite their position. a momentary shadow that suggested Kellen had men circling to flank them. Time was running short for their diversion to work. "You're mining uranium on protected federal land," Robert called out, deliberately raising his voice to cover any sounds from the vehicle behind them. "Using illegal permits, falsified environmental reports, and kidnapping to further corporate interests, that's enough for multiple federal agencies to take interest." "Uranium?" Kellen responded with theatrical surprise. "Is that what you think this is about?" He gestured toward Sarah. "Your young colleague here made the same assumption. Shows a disappointing lack of imagination." Robert felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. If not uranium, then what? The future, Ranger Miller? Specifically, the rare earth elements essential for every piece of technology that powers the modern world. Lithium, neodymium, dysprosium, terbium, the building blocks of every smartphone, electric vehicle, and military weapons system. William tensed beside Robert. Rare earth mining is even more environmentally destructive than uranium extraction. And infinitely more profitable, Kellen confirmed with chilling pragmatism, especially when one can avoid the bothersome regulations and environmental impact studies that make American mining operations so unprofitable compared to our Chinese competitors. As Kellen spoke, Robert subtly shifted his weight, creating a wider gap between himself and William, a gap that would draw attention and create a momentary blind spot behind them. He needed just a few more seconds of distraction. "You won't get away with this," Robert stated, deliberately using the cliché to keep Kellen talking. "Too many people already know." "Know what exactly?" Kellen countered smoothly. "That a logging company secured legal permits for sustainable timber harvesting, that a beloved sheriff sadly suffered a stress-induced breakdown after his granddaughter's tragic hiking accident, that an aging ranger, still traumatized by his son's death, joined his friend in a delusional crusade." The calculated cruelty of these prepared narratives confirmed what Robert had suspected. Kellen had contingency plans for their elimination, stories crafted to explain away their deaths or discredit their accusations. "The evidence," William began. "What evidence?" Kellen interrupted. "Some blurry photographs taken by trespassers, easily dismissed as fabrications by disturbed individuals? No, gentlemen, I'm afraid this situation ends exactly one way." His voice hardened. "Now, where is Jenny Parker?" The moment had come. Robert met William's eyes briefly, a lifetime of friendship condensed into a single glance. Together, they had survived jungle ambushes, navigated post-war adjustments, built lives in this mountain community. Now they would create one final diversion together. "She's right here, you son of a bitch!" William suddenly shouted, drawing his service weapon in a fluid motion and firing twice into the air. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Spotlight beams swung wildly, security personnel dove for cover, and Kellen ducked behind the watchtower railing. In that crucial moment of chaos, Robert glimpsed movement from the vehicle, Jenny and Chief slipping into the darkness of the forest edge, exactly as planned. The diversion worked, but at tremendous cost. A security officer fired, the shot catching William in the shoulder and spinning him to the ground. Robert moved instantly to his friend's side, shielding him with his own body as multiple weapons trained on their position. "Hold your fire!" Kellen ordered sharply. "I need them alive!" He peered over the railing at the vehicle, quickly realizing it was now empty. "Find the girl!" he barked to his team. "She can't have gone far." Two men immediately broke away, heading toward the forest edge with flashlights drawn. Robert helped William into a sitting position, applying pressure to the bleeding shoulder wound. "Did they make it?" William gasped, pain evident in his voice. "They're clear," Robert confirmed quietly. "Chief will keep her safe." Kellen descended from the watchtower, dragging Sarah with him. As they approached, Robert could see that her tactical vest had been removed and her hands were bound behind her back. Despite this, her eyes communicated determined resistance rather than defeat. "That was incredibly stupid, Sheriff," Kellen remarked. standing over them with calculated confidence. Though I suppose it confirms my earlier point about losing a step since Vietnam. Didn't lose everything, William replied through gritted teeth. Still remember how to create a diversion. Kellen's expression darkened as he fully processed the now empty vehicle. "Where is she?" he demanded, pressing the barrel of his weapon against William's injured shoulder. William's face contorted with pain, but he remained silent. Robert intervened, drawing Kellen's attention away from his wounded friend. "Jenny's gone," he stated flatly, "along with all the evidence. She's probably reached the main road by now." "Bullshit," Kellen snarled. "These mountains are locked down tight. Every access point, every trail, my people control them all." "You're forgetting something," Robert countered, a trace of satisfaction entering his voice despite their dire circumstances. "This is our home. We know routes that aren't on any map." Frustration flashed across Kellen's face before he mastered it. "It doesn't matter. One girl with a camera is hardly a threat to an operation of this magnitude. By morning, any evidence she might have will be meaningless." "Why's that?" Sarah asked, speaking for the first time, her voice hoarse but steady. Kellen smiled coldly. Because by morning, the tragic story of a deranged ranger and sheriff who died in a confrontation after kidnapping the sheriff's own granddaughter will dominate local headlines. A sad case of PTSD and grief-induced psychosis, the experts will say. The helicopter pilot approached, interrupting their confrontation. "Sir, satellite shows multiple vehicles approaching from the county line. Looks like state police." Kellen checked his watch, recalculating. "Someone's moved faster than anticipated. Likely your deputy," he noted to William. "Reynolds isn't completely useless after all, calling in support." He gestured to his men. "Change of plans. Secure these three in the helicopter. We're moving to Site B immediately." "The evidence will still get out," Robert insisted as rough hands pulled him to his feet. "Perhaps," Kellen acknowledged with disturbing equanimity, "but corporations like ours deal with environmental protests and legal challenges every day. At worst, we face fines that amount to rounding errors on our quarterly reports." His smile turned predatory. "The real question is whether you'll be alive to see any of it unfold." They were forced toward the helicopter, William struggling to remain upright as blood continued seeping through his shirt. Sarah caught Robert's eye as they were pushed forward, her expression conveying a silent message. She wasn't giving up, was still looking for opportunities. Robert's thoughts turned to Jenny and Chief, moving through the dark forest together. The German shepherd would protect her with every ounce of his training and instinct, leading her along the safest routes, warning of dangers, keeping her moving toward safety. Chief wouldn't fail. Michael had trained him too well for that. As they approached the helicopter, a security officer jogged up to Kellen, speaking urgently into his ear. Kellen's expression shifted from annoyance to genuine concern. "What do you mean, military canine?" he demanded, loud enough for Robert to hear. The officer gestured toward the forest. "The girl didn't run alone. She has a dog with her, German shepherd, professional handling patterns. Team spotted them briefly but couldn't get a clear shot." Kellen's gaze snapped to Robert, sudden recognition dawning. "Miller?" Michael Miller was a military dog handler in Afghanistan. His eyes narrowed. "That's not just any dog with her. It's a trained canine, isn't it?" Robert remained silent, but Kellen read the truth in his face. The security contractor's professional composure cracked momentarily, revealing genuine concern. "Change of plans," he ordered sharply. "Johnson, Murray, take the search team and find that girl. The dog is military trained, likely with detection capabilities. Use thermal imaging and move in pairs. Shoot the animal on sight." The casual order to kill Chief hit Robert like a physical blow. Kellen noticed his reaction and smiled thinly. "Attached to the dog, Ranger Miller? I understand. I worked with military canine units in Afghanistan. Impressive animals. Unfortunately, this one has sided with the wrong team. That dog survived 3 tours in Afghanistan, Robert replied, voice tight with controlled anger. Your men won't find catching him as easy as you think. Perhaps not, Kellen conceded. But unlike Afghanistan, we're not constrained by rules of engagement here. 4 men departed immediately, equipped with thermal imaging gear and automatic weapons. Robert watched them disappear into the darkness, a leaden weight settling in his chest. Chief was formidable, but even the best military dog couldn't outmaneuver armed men with thermal imaging technology indefinitely. They were loaded roughly into the helicopter, forced onto metal benches along the interior wall. William grimaced as his injured shoulder bumped against the fuselage, fresh blood staining his shirt. Sarah was positioned opposite them, her bound hands making balance difficult as the rotors increased their speed. "Where are you taking us?" Sarah demanded as Kellen strapped himself into a forward-facing seat. "Somewhere more private to continue our conversation," he replied vaguely. "We still need to discuss exactly what evidence you think you've gathered and who might have copies." The helicopter lifted off, powerful rotors driving dust and debris in all directions as it rose above the watchtower. Through the side window, Robert could see the lights of approaching vehicles in the distance. The state police Williams' deputy had summoned, arriving too late to prevent their abduction, but perhaps in time to complicate Kellen's operation. As the helicopter banked sharply eastward, Robert caught a final glimpse of the vast forest below. Ancient trees stretching to the horizon, their green canopy now shrouded in darkness. Somewhere in that wilderness, Jenny and Chief were running, carrying evidence that could save this protected land from devastation. Whether that evidence would arrive in time to save its messengers remained to be seen. The flight lasted approximately 20 minutes, the helicopter maintaining low altitude to avoid radar detection. They approached what appeared to be an abandoned logging camp that had been repurposed into a secondary base of operations. Prefabricated structures formed a rough compound surrounded by portable lighting systems and security fencing. "Welcome to Site B," Kellen announced as the helicopter settled onto a concrete landing pad. "Not as sophisticated as our main facility, but adequate for our immediate needs." They were escorted at gunpoint into the largest structure, a converted administrative building now functioning as a combination command center and interrogation facility. The interior featured modern communications equipment, multiple computer workstations, and a separate room with reinforced doors that Robert immediately recognized as a detention area. William's injury finally received attention, though the medical care provided was rudimentary: disinfectant, pressure bandages, and basic painkillers rather than proper emergency treatment. The message was clear: they would be kept alive, but not comfortable. "Now," Kellen began once they were secured in metal chairs within the detention room, "let's discuss what exactly you think you know about our operation." "We know enough," Sarah stated defiantly. "Illegal mining in a protected wilderness area, corporate fraud, kidnapping, multiple counts of attempted murder." Kellen appeared unmoved by the recitation of crimes. "What you fail to understand is the larger context. The rare earth elements beneath Oak Ridge Forest are strategic resources. The nation that controls these materials controls the future of technology." "And that justifies destroying a protected ecosystem?" Robert challenged. "Poisoning groundwater that feeds 3 counties?" "Progress requires sacrifice," Kellen replied with unsettling conviction. "Your generation protected these forests when America could afford such luxuries. My employers understand that in today's world, environmental concerns must be balanced against national security interests." "There's nothing balanced about your approach," William countered, voice strained but resolute despite his injury. "You're not weighing competing interests. You're steamrolling one for the exclusive benefit of the other." Kellen checked his watch impatiently. "This philosophical debate, while fascinating, isn't advancing our primary concern." He leaned forward, expression hardening. Where would Jenny Parker go with the evidence? Who would she contact first? All three prisoners remained silent, exchanging glances but offering no information. Kellen sighed theatrically. I'd hoped to avoid unnecessary unpleasantness, but time is becoming a factor. He nodded to one of his security officers. Start with the young lady. Rangers are trained to endure discomfort, and the sheriff has military experience. Miss Connor likely has the lowest pain threshold. The officer approached Sarah, removing a tactical knife from his belt. Robert lunged forward instinctively but was immediately restrained by two guards. Wait, William called out, desperation evident. Jenny would head for Carson Ridge. There's a ranger outpost there with communications equipment. Kellen held up a hand, stopping his officer mid-motion. Carson Ridge is 15 miles from the watchtower. No one could cover that distance on foot in this time frame, especially in darkness. She knows the terrain, William insisted, and she's in excellent physical condition. She could make it by dawn if she pushes hard. Kellen studied William's face, assessing the information. Carson Ridge, he repeated thoughtfully. Interesting choice. Remote, difficult access, but with direct links to federal authorities. He turned to one of his communications specialists. Redirect search teams to establish a perimeter around Carson Ridge. I want that outpost secured before dawn. Robert and William exchanged subtle glances. They had successfully diverted Kellen's attention to Carson Ridge, while Jenny's actual destination was the highway access point 7 miles in the opposite direction. It wasn't much, but it might buy her crucial time. Now, Kellen continued, turning back to his prisoners, we have approximately 4 hours until dawn. That gives us ample time to discuss exactly what evidence you believe you've collected and who else might be aware of your concerns. The interrogation that followed was methodical and increasingly physical. Kellen himself remained hands-off, directing his specialists with clinical detachment. William, already weakened by blood loss, lost consciousness after an hour. Sarah endured with remarkable resilience, revealing nothing despite escalating threats. Robert focused on memories of Michael, of Chief, of the forest he had protected for decades, anchoring himself against pain with the knowledge that their sacrifice might yet save what mattered most. Through it all, a small part of Robert's mind remained fixed on Jenny and Chief, imagining their progress through the night-shrouded forest. He visualized Chief leading, choosing paths that minimized their scent trail, guiding Jenny safely past dangerous terrain. The mental image sustained him as Kellen's specialists worked to break his resistance. Dawn was approaching when the interrogation was interrupted by urgent communication from one of the search teams. Kellen stepped out to receive the report, his expression unreadable as he returned minutes later. "It seems we've been played," he announced, cold anger evident beneath his professional demeanor. "Carson Ridge is empty, no sign of the girl or the dog." He approached Robert directly. "You sent us in the wrong direction." Robert managed a pained smile despite his split lip and bruised ribs. "You should have studied the topography more carefully." Kellen's composed facade cracked momentarily as he struck Robert with calculated force. "Where is she heading?" "The main highway." "The nearest town?" When Robert remained silent, Kellen turned to his communications officer. "Redirect all teams to establish roadblocks on every potential exit route. The girl cannot reach civilization with that evidence." The sudden wail of alarm sirens interrupted his orders. A security officer burst through the door, face tense with urgency. "Sir, we have multiple vehicles approaching. State police, FBI tactical units, and what appears to be federal environmental enforcement. They've established positions on all access roads." Kellen processed this information with remarkable composure. "How did they find this location? It's not on any registry or map." "Unknown, sir. But they're demanding immediate surrender of all personnel." Robert felt a surge of hope despite his physical condition. Jenny had succeeded. The evidence had reached authorities capable of taking action. Beside him, Sarah straightened in her chair, renewed determination visible through her injuries. Kellen turned to his prisoners, reassessing the situation with cold calculation. "It seems your young friend has been more resourceful than anticipated. Unfortunately, that changes the parameters of our interaction." He drew his sidearm, considering each prisoner in turn. 3 hostages might prove useful in negotiating our exit. However, 3 is excessive for leverage purposes, and injured hostages require additional complications. The message was clear. He intended to eliminate at least one of them before beginning negotiations with authorities. Robert tensed, preparing to launch himself forward despite his restraints to create any distraction that might save William and Sarah. Before Kellen could act on his intentions, a new sound penetrated the building, not sirens or vehicle engines, but a deep, threatening growl emanating from somewhere surprisingly close. Kellen froze, weapon still raised, but attention diverted to this unexpected development. The growl intensified, accompanied by the distinctive sound of powerful canine jaws working against metal. One of the security officers moved toward the rear entrance of the detention area, weapon raised defensively. "Sir, I think," he began, but never finished the sentence. The reinforced door burst open with explosive force as 70 pounds of German Shepherd launched through the opening. Chief moved with battlefield precision, targeting Kellen with unerring accuracy. The security contractor barely had time to register the attack before powerful jaws clamped around his gun arm, the force of the impact driving him to the ground. The remaining security officers reacted with professional speed, weapons swinging toward the dog. Robert shouted a warning, straining against his restraints, certain he was about to witness Chief's death. Instead, the room erupted in coordinated chaos as federal agents poured through both entrances, weapons trained on Kellen's security team. "Federal agents! Weapons down! On the ground now!" Chief maintained his hold on Kellen, the contractor's weapons skittering across the floor as he struggled against the dog's powerful jaws. Only when a federal agent approached and secured Kellen did Chief release his grip, backing away to position himself protectively beside Robert's chair. "Good boy," Robert whispered hoarsely, leaning toward the dog despite his restraints. "Best boy." Chief pressed against his leg, amber eyes vigilant, even as federal agents secured the room and began freeing the prisoners. The dog's fur was matted with mud and pine sap, evidence of a difficult journey through the forest. But his posture remained alert and professional, mission still active until all threats were neutralized. A familiar figure entered behind the federal agents, Jenny Parker, accompanied by what appeared to be the senior FBI agent in charge. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her face scratched from underbrush, but her expression reflected triumph rather than trauma. "Grandpa!" she cried, rushing to William's side as agents carefully removed his restraints. "I got through. Chief led me the whole way, just like Uncle Bob said he would." William managed a weak smile as medical personnel entered to assess his condition. "Never doubted you for a minute, sweetheart." Jenny turned to Robert as paramedics began treating his injuries. "Chief was amazing, Uncle Bob. He found paths I didn't even know existed. When we reached the highway, he helped me flag down a state trooper, then insisted on returning with the tactical team." Her eyes filled with tears of admiration. "He wouldn't leave until he knew you were all safe." Robert reached out his newly freed hand to touch Chief's head. The German Shepherd leaned into the contact, maintaining his protective position while accepting the gesture of gratitude. "Michael trained him well," Robert said simply, emotion making further words impossible. As federal agents secured Kellen and his team, the senior FBI agent approached Robert. "Ranger Miller, I'm Special Agent Donovan. I want you to know that the evidence Ms. Parker provided has already resulted in emergency injunctions against Northwest Timber and its parent corporation. The Environmental Crimes Division is coordinating with our Public Corruption Unit on what appears to be one of the largest resource exploitation conspiracies we've seen in decades. Robert nodded acknowledgement, though his attention remained primarily on Chief and his injured friends. The dog had begun a methodical inspection of the room, checking each corner and shadowed area with professional thoroughness, ensuring all threats were truly neutralized before allowing himself to stand down. Medical evacuation was organized with efficient urgency. William's gunshot wound required immediate surgery, while Sarah and Robert needed treatment for less life-threatening but still serious injuries. As stretchers were prepared, Chief positioned himself beside Robert's, clearly intending to accompany him. "I'm sorry," a paramedic began, "but we can't allow—" "The dog comes," Agent Donovan interrupted firmly. "That's a decorated military canine who just participated in a federal operation. He stays with Ranger Miller." No further objections were raised. As they were loaded into waiting ambulances, Robert kept one hand resting on Chief's back. The dog remained vigilant beside the stretcher, amber eyes constantly scanning for potential threats, even as they left the detention facility behind. In the moment before the ambulance doors closed, Robert caught a final glimpse of the forest stretching beyond the compound, ancient trees bathed in the golden light of dawn, standing tall and undisturbed as they had for centuries. The heritage oak was out there somewhere, still guarding its section of wilderness, still witnessing the unfolding story of those who sought to protect or exploit its domain. Chief settled beside Robert's stretcher as the ambulance began moving, his mission still active but transitioning now from protection to companionship. The German shepherd's presence provided comfort that transcended medication, a living connection to Michael, and a reminder that loyalty could bridge even the deepest losses. As consciousness began to fade beneath the influence of painkillers, Robert rested his hand on Chief's head. The dog leaned into the touch, amber eyes holding Robert's gaze with steady reassurance. "We did it, boy," Robert murmured. "We saved the forest. Michael would be proud of you." Chief's ears perked forward at Michael's name, a soft whine escaping his throat. Acknowledgement of the handler whose training had prepared him for this moment, whose legacy lived on through the bond now forming between his father and his dog. The last thing Robert registered before surrendering to healing darkness was Chief's solid warmth against his side, a promise that when he awakened he would not face recovery alone. Robert Miller's return to consciousness came in stages. First, the antiseptic smell of hospital surroundings, then the rhythmic beeping of monitoring equipment, and finally the warm weight against his leg that told him Chief remained faithfully by his side. He opened his eyes to a sunlit hospital room, momentarily disoriented until the events of the past days came rushing back with painful clarity. "Easy there," a familiar voice cautioned as he attempted to sit up. Sarah Connor stood beside his bed, her own injuries evident in the butterfly bandages across her cheekbone and the careful way she held herself. "Doctor says you've got 3 cracked ribs and enough bruising to win a bar fight championship." "William?" Robert asked immediately, voice rough from disuse. "Out of surgery and stable," Sarah assured him. "The bullet missed major arteries. They're keeping him in intensive care for observation, but the prognosis is good." Relief washed over Robert, followed immediately by concern for the other central figure in their ordeal. "Jenny?" "Completely unharmed, physically at least," Sarah replied, a smile softening her battered features. "She's been shuttling between your room and her grandfather's since they admitted you yesterday. The FBI agents finally convinced her to get some proper rest about 2 hours ago." Robert nodded, then looked down at Chief, who had raised his head at the sound of his voice, but maintained his position against Robert's leg. The German shepherd appeared freshly groomed, his coat clean of the forest debris that had matted it during their ordeal, but his vigilant posture remained unchanged. "He hasn't left your side," Sarah confirmed, following Robert's gaze. The hospital made an exception after Agent Donovan intervened. "Something about essential to the psychological recovery of a key federal witness." Robert extended his hand to Chief, who immediately pressed his muzzle against the weathered palm. The connection felt like an anchor in the disorienting aftermath of trauma, something real and steady when everything else seemed uncertain. "What's happening with Kellen and the mining operation?" Robert asked, turning his attention back to Sarah. She pulled a chair closer to his bedside, wincing slightly as she sat down. "The FBI has been remarkably forthcoming with updates, probably because they want our continued cooperation for their case. Northwest Timber's parent corporation is already distancing itself, claiming Kellen and the local management acted without corporate knowledge or approval." "Convenient," Robert observed dryly. "Very," Sarah agreed. "But the evidence Jenny delivered has already triggered multiple federal investigations. The EPA has declared the site a potential Superfund location and obtained emergency injunctions to halt all activity in Sector 17. Chief shifted position slightly, always maintaining contact with Robert while adjusting to monitor the room's entrance. The dog's training remained evident in every calculated movement, his protective instincts now fully transferred to his new handler. "And Kellen?" Robert pressed. Sarah's expression hardened. "In federal custody, facing multiple felony charges, kidnapping, attempted murder, environmental crimes, conspiracy. The FBI is particularly interested in his corporate connections. Apparently, he's started negotiating already, offering information on the executives who authorized the operation." "Good," Robert said simply. The knowledge that justice was being pursued brought some measure of satisfaction, though it couldn't erase the physical and emotional toll of their ordeal. A nurse entered to check Robert's vital signs, pausing momentarily at the sight of Chief before continuing her professional assessment. "Your numbers are improving, Mr. Miller," she reported with practiced cheerfulness. "Dr. Wilson will be by later this morning to discuss your recovery plan." After she departed, Sarah leaned closer, her voice lowering conspiratorially. "The media is having a field day with this story. Heroic ranger and sheriff uncover corporate conspiracy. Military dog saves former handler's father." The governor called a press conference to announce a special task force on protected lands enforcement. Robert grimaced slightly. "Never been one for the spotlight." "Too late," Sarah replied with a hint of amusement. "You're already being called the guardian of Oak Ridge Forest on national news. Chief here has his own hashtag trending." As if understanding, Chief huffed softly, his amber eyes remaining fixed on Robert with steady devotion. The dog's presence provided comfort that transcended words, a living connection to Michael, to purpose, to the certainty that some bonds survive even the greatest losses. The door opened again, and Jenny Parker entered carrying a tray of coffee cups. Her face brightened immediately upon seeing Robert awake. "Uncle Bob," she exclaimed, setting down the tray and moving quickly to his bedside. "Thank goodness. The doctor said you might sleep through the morning." Chief acknowledged Jenny with a brief tail wag, but remained positioned against Robert, his mission parameters clearly prioritizing protection of his primary charge. The dog's ability to recognize Jenny as an ally while maintaining his protective stance impressed Sarah, who had worked with K9 units for years without seeing such nuanced behavior. "How's your grandfather?" Robert asked, studying Jenny's face for signs of the trauma she had endured. "Grumpy and demanding to be released," Jenny reported with a smile that suggested this behavior was reassuringly normal. "The nurses have threatened to sedate him if he doesn't stop trying to conduct sheriff's business from his hospital bed." The familiar image of William's stubborn determination brought a smile to Robert's face despite his injuries. Some things remained constant even when the world turned upside down. "And you?" Robert asked more gently. "How are you holding up?" Jenny's expression sobered. I'm okay. Better than I should be, probably. The FBI psychologist says that might change when everything catches up to me. But for now, she reached down to stroke Chief's head. I'm just grateful to be here, to have helped stop them before they destroyed the forest. Chief leaned briefly into Jenny's touch before resuming his vigilant watch, his training allowing him to accept affection without compromising his protective duties. The bond forming between the dog and Michael's family represented healing that transcended the physical, connections rebuilding across the gaps left by loss. Chief is the real hero, Jenny continued, her voice softening with admiration. He knew exactly where to go, how to avoid the search teams. When we reached the highway, he practically dragged me to the first patrol car that passed. Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. It was like Michael was guiding us through him. Robert nodded, unable to dismiss the same feeling that had sustained him through their ordeal. Not supernatural intervention, but the living legacy of his son's training and love embodied in this extraordinary animal. Michael always said Chief was the smartest dog he'd ever trained, Robert replied, emotion making his voice rougher than usual. Said they communicated without words sometimes, just knowing what the other needed. Sarah excused herself tactfully, leaving Robert and Jenny to share their connection to Michael through memories and through the living presence of his dog. Chief seemed to understand the significance of the moment, his posture relaxing slightly as the conversation continued, though his vigilance never fully disappeared. The morning progressed with medical staff coming and going, each expressing varying degrees of surprise and admiration for Chief's disciplined presence. The German Shepherd accepted their attention with professional detachment, acknowledging friendly overtures without being distracted from his self-appointed mission. By afternoon, Robert had been briefed by FBI agents regarding the ongoing investigation and his eventual role as a witness in the federal case against Kellen and his corporate backers. The scope of the conspiracy had expanded beyond their initial understanding, with evidence suggesting corruption extending into regulatory agencies and possibly congressional offices. Your testimony will be crucial, Agent Donovan explained during his visit. But so will your ongoing protection until the trial. Kellen worked for powerful people who won't appreciate his cooperation with prosecutors. I'm not worried, Robert replied with quiet confidence, one hand resting on Chief's solid presence beside him. Donovan nodded, understanding the unspoken message. Nevertheless, we'll be maintaining surveillance on you and Sheriff Parker until the primary defendants are in custody. Ms. Parker as well, though she's agreed to relocate temporarily for additional security. After the agent departed, Robert was finally permitted to visit William in the intensive care unit. Chief accompanied him despite initial objections from medical staff, the dog's disciplined behavior eventually overcoming institutional regulations. Robert made the journey in a wheelchair, his injured body still too weak for independent movement, with Chief walking precisely beside him, alert to every person they passed in the hospital corridors. William looked smaller somehow against the white hospital sheets, his robust frame diminished by injury and medical intervention. Nevertheless, his eyes brightened with familiar determination when Robert and Chief entered his room. "About time you showed up," William greeted them, his voice weaker than normal, but still carrying his characteristic gruffness. "They treating you better than me? I've been asking for decent coffee for hours." Robert smiled, recognizing the complaint as William's way of asserting normalcy in abnormal circumstances. "Perks of having a K9 bodyguard," he replied, gesturing toward Chief. "The nurses bring treats for him and coffee for me." William's expression softened as he regarded the German Shepherd. "That dog saved my granddaughter's life, probably saved all of us." He extended his hand, and Chief approached the bed cautiously, sniffing the sheriff's fingers before allowing a brief pat on his head. Thank you, boy. The simple gratitude carried profound weight in the sterile hospital room. Chief returned to Robert's side after the acknowledgement, resuming his protective position beside the wheelchair. "Jenny got the evidence out," William said after a moment of companionable silence. "My granddaughter. Hard to believe she had that kind of courage in her." "Not hard at all," Robert countered gently. "She's your granddaughter. Standing up for what's right runs in the family." William's eyes glistened momentarily. "For a while there, I thought I'd lost her. Thought I'd failed Eleanor and everything we built together." "You didn't fail anyone," Robert assured him. "You were willing to sacrifice everything to save her. That's not failure. That's being a father, a grandfather." The conversation turned to recovery plans, to the federal investigation, to the future of Oak Ridge Forest, now that the threat to Sector 17 had been exposed. Throughout their discussion, Chief maintained his vigilant presence, occasionally checking the room's entrance but always returning to Robert's side, his loyalty unwavering. As they prepared to leave, William reached for Robert's arm, his expression suddenly serious. "What happens with Chief now? The Forest Service will want their K-9 back, won't they?" The question struck directly at concerns Robert had been avoiding since their rescue. Chief had become far more than a working dog to him. He was a living connection to Michael, a partner who had saved his life, a presence that somehow filled the empty spaces grief had carved into his existence. "Sarah mentioned something about medical retirement," Robert replied carefully. "Chief's technically too old for field service anyway. They were considering options before all this happened." William studied the German Shepherd thoughtfully. "That dog belongs with you, Bob. Anyone with eyes can see it." "I think so too," Robert admitted quietly. "But there are protocols, regulations." "Regulations," William scoffed with familiar impatience. "After what you've both been through, let them try to separate you. I'll have the governor on the phone so fast their heads will spin." The fierce protectiveness in William's voice, a sheriff defending what he knew to be right, despite rules to the contrary, brought a smile to Robert's face. Some aspects of their friendship had survived intact through betrayal, violence, and revelation. That continuity felt precious amid so much change. Robert returned to his room to find Sarah waiting with news that simultaneously relieved and complicated his situation. "I've spoken with K-9 program administrators," she reported without preamble. "Chief is being officially retired from active service effective immediately. His age and the trauma of recent events qualify him for the adoption program." Robert felt hope rising, tempered by cautious realism. "And there's a waiting list for retired military dogs," Sarah continued, her expression carefully neutral, "plus specific requirements for adoption, secure fencing, regular veterinary care, demonstrated ability to handle a dog with specialized training." Chief sat beside Robert's wheelchair, attentive to the conversation, as if understanding its significance to his future. The dog's calm demeanor belied the intensity of his bond with Robert, a connection that had formed with remarkable speed yet felt as natural as breathing. "I see," Robert said simply, disappointment settling heavily despite his attempts to prepare for this outcome. Sarah's professional mask suddenly cracked into a genuine smile. "However, the program administrators have reviewed Chief's recent service record and noted his unique circumstance as the former partner of your son. They've approved an immediate placement, permanent adoption by next of kin with documented military experience." Understanding dawned slowly. "You mean, congratulations," Sarah confirmed, producing official-looking paperwork from her bag. "You're now the legal owner of one slightly used but extremely loyal German Shepherd. The department even approved a stipend for his ongoing care and medical needs as a retired service animal." Robert found himself momentarily speechless, emotion tightening his throat as he looked down at Chief. The dog met his gaze steadily, amber eyes reflecting what seemed like understanding. They belonged together now, officially and permanently. "There's one more thing," Sarah added, her tone softening further. "The Forest Service is offering you a choice: full retirement with honors and increased pension, or a modified role as senior consultant for the K-9 training program. Either way, they want to recognize your service and recent contributions." The options represented different paths forward: complete withdrawal from the career that had defined him, or continuation in a new capacity that honored his experience while accommodating his changed circumstances. Before his ordeal, retirement had loomed as an unwelcome transition. Now, with Chief at his side, either option offered possibilities rather than limitations. "I'll need some time to think about it," Robert replied, his hand finding Chief's fur in what had already become a habitual gesture of connection. "Take all the time you need," Sarah assured him. "You've earned it." As she departed, Robert contemplated the unexpected turn his life had taken. The forest he had protected for decades had nearly killed him, yet also brought him Chief, a living connection to Michael, a partner in survival, a reason to face each day with purpose rather than just endurance. Chief seemed to sense his reflective mood, pressing closer against the wheelchair, offering silent companionship that required no words. The dog's steady presence anchored Robert amid the swirling uncertainties of recovery and whatever might follow. That evening, as sunset painted the hospital room in warm golden light, Jenny visited again, bringing photographs she had taken of the heritage oak before all the trouble began. The ancient tree stood majestic in the images, its massive trunk and spreading branches testifying to centuries of resilience against storms, fires, and human interference. "I thought you might like to see it," she explained, arranging the photos where Robert could easily view them from his bed. "To remember what we were fighting for." Robert studied the images, remembering how it felt to be chained to that living monument, how despair had nearly claimed him before Chief and the other shepherds appeared like guardians from another realm. The heritage oak had witnessed his darkest moment and, in its way, participated in his salvation. "The FBI says the mining equipment has been removed," Jenny continued. "The environmental assessment team found minimal soil contamination since they hadn't progressed to actual extraction. The forest will recover completely." "It always does," Robert observed softly. "Given time and protection, nature heals itself. People, too, sometimes." Chief had positioned himself on the floor beside Robert's bed, alert but relaxed in Jenny's presence. The dog's acceptance of her as part of his extended family seemed complete, a widening circle of connection that now included Robert, William, Jenny, and Sarah. "Grandpa's talking about retiring," Jenny mentioned, stroking Chief's head gently as she spoke. "Says he's thinking of focusing on environmental advocacy instead. Can you imagine? William Parker, eco-warrior." The image brought a smile to Robert's face despite his injuries. "Your grandfather always fights for what he believes in. The target may change, but not the determination." "What about you?" Jenny asked. "Will you stay in Oak Ridge after everything?" Robert considered the question carefully. The community had been his home for over 40 years, the forest his workplace and sanctuary. Recent events had revealed darker currents beneath the surface of both, yet had also demonstrated profound resilience and unexpected allies. "I think so," he answered finally. "Too many roots here to transplant easily at my age. Besides," he added, glancing down at Chief, "I have responsibilities now." Chief's ears perked forward at the attention, his amber eyes meeting Robert's with that uncanny perception that transcended ordinary animal intelligence. The dog seemed to understand not just commands, but context, emotional states, even complex human relationships. "He saved us all," Jenny said softly, watching the silent communication between man and dog. "Not just physically. I think, I think he brought something back that was missing. For all of us. Robert nodded, unable to articulate the profound truth in her observation. Chief had indeed restored something vital. For Robert, a connection to Michael that felt living rather than memorial. For William, faith in family bonds that transcended betrayal. For Jenny, confidence in her own courage and resilience. For Sarah, renewed purpose in her professional path. As visiting hours ended and Jenny departed with promises to return the following day, Robert settled back against his pillows, fatigue from healing injuries claiming him despite his desire to remain awake. Chief maintained his position beside the bed, a silent guardian against nightmares and uncertainty alike. "We made it, boy," Robert murmured as consciousness began to fade. "Whatever comes next, we face it together," Chief responded with a soft sound of agreement, settling his head on his paws, but maintaining watchful vigilance even as his new handler drifted toward healing sleep. The bond between them, forged in crisis, strengthened through shared purpose, now officially recognized, represented not just survival, but the possibility of renewal. Outside the hospital window, stars emerged in the darkening sky above Oak Ridge Forest. The heritage oak stood sentinel as it had for centuries, roots deep in ancient soil, branches reaching toward future skies. Life continued its cycle of challenge and resilience, loss and recovery, endings transformed into unexpected beginnings. In the quiet hospital room, man and dog rested together, connected by invisible threads of loyalty, purpose, and the enduring legacy of a son and handler whose training had prepared Chief for this most important mission, bringing Robert Miller home when he needed it most. 3 months passed with a steady rhythm of healing and renewal. Summer had surrendered to early autumn, painting Oak Ridge Forest in vibrant hues of gold and crimson. Robert Miller stood on the porch of his cabin, morning coffee steaming in his hand as he watched Chief patrol the perimeter of the property. A daily ritual the German Shepherd performed with unwavering dedication regardless of weather or circumstance. "All clear, boy?" Robert called, his voice stronger now than during those first weeks of recovery when even speaking had exhausted him. Chief trotted back to the porch, posture relaxed but alert, his way of signaling that all was well in their shared domain. The dog had seamlessly transitioned from military precision to civilian life without losing the core qualities that made him exceptional. He remained vigilant without being hyper-vigilant, protective without aggression, attentive to Robert's needs without becoming dependent. The federal case against Victor Kellen and his corporate sponsors had progressed with surprising speed. Robert's testimony, along with Williams and Sarah's, had provided crucial evidence for the prosecution. Jenny's photographs and recordings had proven even more valuable, documenting environmental crimes that might otherwise have been dismissed as unsubstantiated allegations. The legal proceedings continued, but early plea agreements from lower-level conspirators suggested the case would result in significant penalties and, more importantly, permanent protection for Sector 17. Robert had ultimately chosen the middle path between full retirement and continued service. As special consultant to the Forest Service's K-9 program, he worked 3 days a week helping train handlers and their canine partners. Chief accompanied him to these sessions, serving as a demonstration partner whose exceptional skills set the standard for younger dogs. The arrangement provided structure without overwhelming Robert's still recovering body, and purpose without the physical demands of regular ranger duties. "Visitors coming today," Robert reminded Chief as they returned inside for breakfast. "William and Jenny might want to look presentable." Chief tilted his head at the familiar names, amber eyes brightening with recognition. The dog had developed distinct responses to different members of their extended family. Respectful attention for William, playful enthusiasm for Jenny, professional collaboration with Sarah. Each relationship reflected nuanced understanding that continuously amazed those who witnessed it. William's recovery had taken longer than expected, complications from his gunshot wound requiring additional surgery and extensive physical therapy. The experience had transformed the once indomitable sheriff in subtle but significant ways. He had indeed retired from law enforcement, channeling his considerable energy into environmental advocacy with the same determination he had once applied to upholding the law. His testimony before state legislative committees had already influenced pending regulations on mining operations in protected areas. The cabin Robert had shared with Eleanor and later maintained as a shrine to memory after her passing had gradually transformed during his recovery. Chief's presence catalyzed changes that might otherwise have taken years: dog beds in strategic locations, toys organized in baskets, photographs of Michael now displayed prominently rather than tucked away in painful remembrance. The space felt lived in again, a home rather than a memorial. Robert prepared breakfast for them both, Chief waiting patiently for his portion with the dignified restraint that characterized everything he did. Their morning routine had developed naturally over the weeks of recovery. Breakfast together, a moderate hike through nearby trails, Robert's physical therapy exercises under Chief's watchful supervision, then whatever work or appointments the day might hold. "Federal prosecutor called yesterday," Robert mentioned as they ate. "Says the company executives are finally turning on each other. Corporate immunity in exchange for testimony." He shook his head at the predictable pattern. Honor among thieves lasts exactly as long as it's profitable. Chief watched him with that steady gaze that sometimes made Robert feel the dog understood not just his words, but their deeper implications. Michael had often described this quality in his letters from Afghanistan, how Chief seemed to grasp context and nuance beyond simple commands, how the dog anticipated needs before they were expressed. After breakfast, they walked the eastern trail that led toward the heritage oak. The ancient tree had become a regular destination during Robert's recovery, its enduring presence somehow reassuring after everything they had endured beneath its branches. The site where Robert had been chained had healed without visible scarring, the tree's massive trunk absorbing that brief human cruelty into its centuries-long story. Chief always approached the heritage oak with noticeable reverence, his usual trotting pace slowing to a deliberate walk as they neared the clearing. Today he performed his customary circuit around the tree's base before settling beside Robert on a fallen log that offered a comfortable resting place. "Michael used to climb this tree," Robert told Chief, continuing a one-sided conversation that had become therapeutic during his recovery. "Said he could see all the way to the mountains from the highest branches. His mother worried he'd fall, but that boy never did. Had a natural balance about him." Chief's ears perked forward at Michael's name, amber eyes fixed on Robert with unwavering attention. The dog's response to stories about his former handler had evolved from initial distress to something that seemed remarkably like appreciation, as if these shared memories completed a circuit between them. "He'd be proud of you," Robert continued, one hand resting on Chief's solid presence beside him. "Not just for finding me, but for how you've adapted. Military dogs aren't supposed to transition this smoothly to civilian life. You're exceptional, just like he always said." The sound of approaching footsteps interrupted their moment of reflection. Chief alerted, but didn't tense, his posture indicating recognition rather than concern. Moments later, William and Jenny appeared on the trail, their own progress slowed by William's still healing injuries. "Thought we might find you here," William called as they approached. His voice carried the same authoritative tone as always, though his physical presence had diminished somewhat during recovery. He leaned more heavily on his walking stick than he would have admitted, pride still influencing his self-perception even as he adapted to new limitations. Chief rose to greet them, approaching Jenny first with the special attention he always showed her. The bond between them had strengthened during the months following their forest escape, united by shared experience and mutual respect born in crisis. "How's our hero today?" Jenny asked, kneeling to receive Chief's greeting despite her grandfather's customary grumbling about her designer jeans touching forest soil. "Which one?" William asked dryly, easing himself onto the log beside Robert. "The four-legged hero or the stubborn old ranger?" "Both doing well," Robert answered with the easy rhythm of long friendship. Their shared ordeal had burned away the trivial frictions of daily life, leaving a relationship distilled to its essential elements: trust, respect, shared values, and the comfortable shorthand of men who had seen each other at both their best and worst. Jenny produced treats from her pocket, special dog biscuits she baked specifically for Chief using a recipe she had researched for optimal canine nutrition. The German Shepherd accepted them with gentlemanly restraint, his disciplined nature evident even in this small pleasure. "Sarah called this morning," she mentioned, joining them on the makeshift bench. "The new canine training facility has been approved. They're naming it after Michael." Robert absorbed this news with complex emotion. Pride in his son's lasting legacy, gratitude for the recognition, lingering grief that Michael wouldn't see the impact of his work. Chief pressed closer against his leg, offering silent support with that uncanny sensitivity to emotional shifts. "She also mentioned they've approached her about taking over as head trainer," William added. "Said she's considering it, but wanted to talk to you first." "She'd be excellent," Robert replied thoughtfully. "Has the right combination of technical knowledge and respect for the dogs as partners, not just tools." He glanced down at Chief. "This one taught her a lot about what's possible when you trust a dog's intelligence." The conversation drifted to community matters: the upcoming town council election, the proposed expansion of the visitor center at the forest's main entrance, Jenny's new position with a regional environmental nonprofit. Chief remained attentive throughout, occasionally scanning their surroundings but primarily focused on the human interaction before him. "There's something else we wanted to discuss," William said eventually, his tone shifting toward greater seriousness. "The federal prosecutor contacted me about the sentencing recommendations for Kellen and the corporate executives. They're asking for victim impact statements." Robert nodded slowly, having anticipated this development. The legal system's machinery ground forward regardless of whether those caught in its gears were ready to revisit their trauma. "I'll provide whatever helps ensure they can't threaten the forest again," he stated simply. Chief, too, in his own way. His presence in the courtroom would speak volumes. "That's actually part of what I wanted to discuss," Jenny interjected, her expression brightening. "I've been working with a veterans organization that specializes in service dog advocacy. They're interested in Chief's story, how a military canine transitioned to civilian life and went on to save lives in a completely different context." Chief's ears perked forward at his name, amber eyes moving between the humans as if following the conversation. His uncanny ability to recognize when he was the subject of discussion never ceased to impress those who witnessed it. "What kind of advocacy?" Robert asked cautiously. While proud of Chief's accomplishments, he remained protective of the dog's well-being and reluctant to exploit their story for attention. "Educational programs mostly," Jenny explained, "helping military dogs find appropriate homes after service, supporting handlers with PTSD, demonstrating the capabilities of properly trained service animals. They want to feature Chief as an example of successful transition and continued purpose." William leaned forward slightly, his expression reflecting rare enthusiasm. "The program director is a former military canine handler herself. Lost her leg in Afghanistan, but credits her service dog with saving her life, both in combat and during recovery. She understands what these animals mean to their handlers." Robert considered the proposal thoughtfully, one hand absently stroking Chief's fur. The German Shepherd remained calm beside him, neither seeking the attention nor moving away from it, comfortable in a partnership that had grown more natural with each passing day. "Michael always said Chief had a greater purpose," Robert mused quietly. that some dogs are born with gifts that transcend normal training, abilities that serve a higher calling. He glanced down at the dog, who met his gaze with steady attentiveness. If sharing his story helps other dogs like him find their purpose, I think Michael would approve. Chief seemed to straighten at this, his posture reflecting the dignity that had impressed everyone from hospital staff to federal agents during their ordeal. The dog's calm confidence suggested an understanding of his own exceptional nature without any trace of canine arrogance, simply a working animal who performed his duties with excellence. "The organization is hosting an event next month," Jenny continued, clearly pleased by Robert's receptiveness. "They've invited Chief as a special guest, with you as his handler, of course. It would mean a lot to the veterans participating." "We'll be there," Robert decided, the commitment feeling right in a way few things had since Michael's death. Finding purpose in their shared experience, creating meaning from trauma, these represented healing beyond the merely physical recovery they had both achieved. As their conversation continued, clouds gathered on the western horizon, promising afternoon rain. Chief noticed the changing weather before the humans, his gaze shifting toward the darkening sky with the assessment of an animal attuned to natural patterns. Robert recognized the signal from months of partnership. "We should head back before the storm hits," he suggested, leveraging his walking stick to stand from the log. His body moved more easily now than during early recovery, though certain movements still triggered reminders of injuries sustained during his ordeal. They walked together along the forest trail, Chief leading the way with occasional pauses to ensure the humans, particularly William with his slower pace, maintained contact. The dog's protective instinct extended naturally to their entire small group, his training allowing him to monitor multiple charges with professional efficiency. At the cabin, Jenny prepared lunch while William and Robert settled on the covered porch, watching the approaching storm with the appreciation of men whose lives had been shaped by natural rhythms. Chief positioned himself strategically between them, alert to their needs while maintaining awareness of their surroundings. "Never thought I'd be retired before 70, William remarked, easing his injured shoulder into a more comfortable position. "Always figured they'd have to drag me out of the sheriff's office." "Life has a way of changing our plans," Robert replied, the simple observation carrying the weight of shared experience. "Sometimes for the worse, sometimes." His gaze shifted to Chief, who had risen to investigate a sound near the tree line before returning to his post. "Sometimes for reasons we couldn't have imagined." The first raindrops began to fall, creating a gentle percussion on the cabin's metal roof. Chief moved closer to Robert's chair, not from fear of the weather, but from the protective instinct that remained his defining characteristic. The dog's consistent presence had become essential to Robert's sense of security and purpose, a partnership that transcended conventional human-animal relationships. Jenny called them in for lunch, the cabin's interior warm with both physical comfort and the less tangible warmth of connection. As they gathered around the table, Chief settled in his customary spot beside Robert's chair, alert but relaxed in the presence of those he had come to recognize as family. "I'm thinking of resuming Michael's project," Jenny mentioned as they ate. When the others looked questioningly, she clarified, "The forest history documentation. Michael had started recording oral histories from the oldest residents about how Oak Ridge Forest has changed over the decades. I found his notes when we were organizing his things." Robert nodded, remembering his son's enthusiasm for the project. He believed understanding the past was essential to protecting the future. Said the forest had stories we needed to preserve alongside the trees themselves. "I'd like to include your story," Jenny continued, her expression earnest. "Both of you. What happened this summer is part of the forest's history now, a turning point in its protection." William considered this with uncharacteristic thoughtfulness. "Not sure people need to hear about an old sheriff who nearly lost everything. Not exactly inspirational material." "I disagree," Robert countered firmly. People need to hear about someone who faced impossible choices and ultimately chose what was right over what was easy. That's exactly the kind of story that matters. Chief shifted positions slightly, pressing against Robert's leg as if offering silent support for this perspective. The dog's intuitive responses to emotional undercurrents continued to amaze everyone who witnessed them. "And they need to hear about a remarkable dog," Jenny added, smiling at Chief. "How he bridged past and present, brought together a broken family, saved lives through loyalty and training." The German Shepherd acknowledged this praise with dignified acceptance, neither seeking additional attention nor moving away from the focus, simply present in the moment with the same steadfast reliability that characterized everything he did. As lunch concluded and the rain intensified outside, they moved to the cabin's small living room. Chief positioned himself near the hearth where Robert had lit a fire against the autumn chill, his amber eyes reflecting the dancing flames. The domesticity of the scene belied the extraordinary circumstances that had brought them all together. "The Forest Service called yesterday," Robert mentioned as they settled with coffee. "They're establishing a new protection designation for Sector 17 and the surrounding areas. Higher security, more frequent patrols, advanced monitoring systems." "About time," William commented. "Though it took nearly losing you to make it happen. Worth it if it means the heritage oak stands for another century," Robert replied simply. His gaze moved to the photographs on the mantel, Eleanor in her garden, Michael in uniform with a younger Chief beside him, and now newer images. Robert and Chief at the training facility, William and Jenny at the hospital during recovery, Sarah accepting her promotion to head trainer. The visual timeline represented not just personal history, but the evolution of purpose, how loss and grief had transformed through crisis into new connections and renewed meaning. Chief featured prominently in these newer photographs, his presence marking the dividing line between before and after, between isolation and belonging. As afternoon deepened toward evening, the conversation turned to practical matters. William's upcoming testimony in Washington, Jenny's new apartment closer to her environmental advocacy work, Robert's expanded role in the canine training program. Chief listened with that same attentive awareness that suggested comprehension beyond what most would attribute to even the most intelligent dog. When William and Jenny eventually prepared to leave, the rain having subsided to a gentle mist, Chief accompanied them to their vehicle with protective attentiveness. The dog checked the surrounding area before allowing them to enter, then watched until they had safely departed down the cabin's long driveway. Robert stood on the porch, observing this ritual with appreciation for Chief's unwavering dedication. When the vehicle disappeared from view, the German Shepherd returned to his side, mission complete, but vigilance never fully relaxed. "Good job, boy," Robert said softly, the simple praise carrying deeper meaning between them. "Michael would be proud of the watch you keep." They returned inside as darkness settled over the forest. Robert moved through his evening routine, stoking the fire, preparing Chief's dinner alongside his own, reviewing materials for the next day's training session. The dog maintained his customary position nearby, comfortable in their shared domesticity, yet always alert to potential needs or concerns. Later, as Robert prepared for sleep, Chief performed his nightly security check, moving methodically through each room of the cabin, ensuring windows and doors were secure, assessing any changes from their previous configuration. The ritual had evolved naturally during their early days together, the dog's military training adapting seamlessly to civilian security protocols. "All clear?" Robert asked as Chief returned to the bedroom, the question part of their established pattern. Chief settled onto his bed beside Robert's with a soft huff of confirmation. The parallel sleeping arrangement had been Chief's choice from the beginning, close enough for protection, separate enough to maintain vigilance. Robert had observed how the dog positioned himself between the bedroom door and the bed, creating a protective barrier that allowed them both to rest more comfortably. "Good night, boy," Robert said quietly, reaching down to touch Chief's head in their nightly ritual of connection. Thank you for finding me. The simple gratitude encompassed far more than the literal rescue months earlier. Chief had found him in every sense that mattered, located him when lost, connected him to Michael's memory in living form, guided him from isolation back to purpose and family. The partnership they had formed transcended conventional understanding of human-animal relationships, entering territory that felt sacred in its depth and meaning. Chief acknowledged this nightly recognition with gentle pressure against Robert's hand, before settling more fully onto his bed, amber eyes remaining alert even as his body relaxed. His vigilance would continue through the night, as it did every night, a guardian's watch maintained with unwavering dedication. As sleep approached, Robert found himself reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this moment of peace. The heritage oak still stood in Sector 17, roots deep in ancient soil, branches reaching toward future skies. The forest that had nearly taken his life had also returned it to him in unexpected form, through the loyalty of an extraordinary dog who had once belonged to his son and now belonged with him. Outside, the gentle rain continued, nourishing the forest that defined their shared world. Chief's breathing deepened but never surrendered completely to unconsciousness, always partially alert, always ready to respond if needed. In that vigilant presence, Robert found the security that allowed true rest, true healing, true connection to what remained after so much had been lost. "We made it, Michael," he whispered into the darkness, knowing Chief would hear and understand in his own way. "We're keeping watch, just like you taught him." The German shepherd's ears twitched at the familiar name, acknowledgement without disturbance. Together they drifted toward sleep, man and dog, connected by invisible threads of loyalty, purpose, and the enduring legacy of a son whose training had prepared Chief for this most important mission, bringing Robert Miller home in every sense that mattered. In the quiet cabin, surrounded by forests that had witnessed their ordeal and their triumph, they rested together, guardians of memory, protectors of wilderness, companions on a journey neither could have anticipated, but both now embraced with profound gratitude. The circle of connection that had begun with Michael now expanded through them to encompass an extended family, united by shared purpose and mutual protection. Chief sighed softly in the darkness, a sound of contentment rather than surrender. Whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, they would face them together. The weathered ranger and the scarred shepherd, finding in each other's company the strength to continue their watch over all they had sworn to protect. Have you ever felt that life's second chapter might hold even deeper meaning than the first? Robert Miller's journey reminds us that even in our 60s, purpose and connection can find us in unexpected ways. After losing his son and nearly losing his own life, Robert found healing through the extraordinary bond with Chief, a retired military dog who became his guardian, companion, and living link to his son's legacy. Their story teaches us that it's never too late for new beginnings, that loyalty transcends words, and that our greatest contributions may still lie ahead. The forest Robert protected for decades ultimately gave him back something precious, a reason to move forward rather than merely exist. Like the heritage oak that survived countless seasons, we too can find renewal after storm and loss. Our deepest wounds sometimes become doorways to our most meaningful connections. What unexpected companion has helped you heal from loss in your later years? Has an animal ever connected you to something larger than yourself? Please share your stories of finding purpose after 55 in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.